Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Lily grew up in an orphanage. She never questioned who her real parents were because she'd seen all the other kids. Lily didn't remember her father and mother. She felt like she'd been in the orphanage forever. She was even born here. But a lot of the other kids had it rough. Some of them, living at home, suffered beatings and reproaches. Some of them starved. Some of them saw the hard scenes when alcoholic or drug-addicted parents were not ashamed to lead a habitual lifestyle in front of their children. There were boys and girls who entered the orphanage. The real Mowgli didn't know how to use cutlery, didn't know how to make a bed behind them. Lily looked down on them. She was by nature very often dense, pleased in appearance too. The girl grew pretty like a doll, face as if porcelain, thin dark eyebrows, long eyelashes, bobbing hair. The teachers and nannies loved Lily, and she did not trouble them at all. They often brought her clothes, some skirts and blouses, bows left by their daughters for the shelves. And Lily was dressed smartly of all her peers. The teachers sincerely wanted to bring Lily into the family and wondered why nobody had taken her so far. After all, as they say, this is a gift version of the child. But potential parents rarely visited them. They preferred to take very young children, no older than 3 years. That's what the old nanny Adriana said. A kid like that is still a mystery. You don't know what he'll grow up to be. And if the kids are older, you can see their nature right away. That same nanny shed some light on Lily's origins. Your mother should have never taken you in, she said. Lily girl at that time was already 12 years old, and she understood a lot. Lily, who had heard something about her relatives for the first time, was surprised. Do you know anything about my mom? Good woman, decent. Yeah, the doctors scared her back in the day. She was into some kind of extreme sports. Well, they said it had something to do with it. Concluded that the baby would be born with a defect. The baby was already far along, about to go into labor, and I understood that her husband forbade her to take you out of the hospital. Her husband had a son in his second marriage, and he told his wife that we had enough of one child. We'll raise my boy, put him on his feet, and that's enough. How do you know that? Your mother came here when you were just transferred from the orphanage. She wanted to know if her daughter was okay. That's when we had that one conversation. And then our supervisor decided that your mother would come here regularly. She didn't like that. Parents are different. Some come in drunk. Some of them are so out of control, you could call the police. So she told me to say that you were adopted, and the state protects the secrecy of adoption. So we won't give you any information. And the truth is, you've been living here just as you are. That's a cruel thing to say, Lily. She wasn't planning on taking you anyway. It's your mother, sighed the nanny. You were really troubled at first, that heart murmur. The doctor would find a heart murmur, then a developmental delay. Then you threw yourself out, and you became the smartest, the prettiest. Since the day Nanny Adriana told the girl the secret, did something change in her? It was as if she'd become bitter at the orphanage and stopped being a role model. The caregivers attributed it to the transitional age and the fact that Lily had fallen in love with David, the bully 9th grader. The last name David. Everyone laughed at it as a kid. Maybe that's what shaped the kid's drive, to use his fists at every turn. He had a crush on Lily too, so he got her a present. They sneak off to the tattoo parlor together. David had a knight with a sword on his arms, and Lily had a dragon holding a rose on her shoulder. At night her shoulder ached and she couldn't sleep. Lily went to cry to the nurse Adriana, who was on duty just then. What could she have done to help? Helped a nail with oil on it, and scolded the girl. You're smart enough. You're not some girl from jail to wear a tattoo. You're gonna get tattooed head to toe. Okay, David, he's a guy, and you're gonna be getting those tattoos. Mark my words. Lily thought she loved David too much to refuse his gift. Either way, the dragon would remain as a memento of her first love. And so it was. Soon Lily was unexpectedly adopted. It happened almost against the girl's will. An elderly woman came to the orphanage unexpectedly and told her that her daughter had grown up, left to study, and would not return to her home. And it is painfully dreary to be alone. So she wants to take an older girl, so that her adopted daughter would become her helper and companion. Caregiver immediately saw in this chance for their favorite Lily and began to persuade Aunt Clara to take her. You won't find a better girl. Hardworking, responsible, a real star. Aunt Clara didn't mind, but Lily did. She'd have to leave the orphanage, to part with David without the possibility of seeing her again in the near future. It took a lot of effort to persuade her. Subsequently, Lily had to regret her decision. Aunt Clara took her to the village to a small dark house on the outskirts. She had to learn to do all the housework, even to stow the stove. And the woman had a large vegetable garden, and from spring to fall, she had to literally work there, digging, planting, weeding, helping, processing the harvest. Now Lily no longer resembled a doll. She was badly burned, arms cupped and kneaded. Aunt Clara dressed her poorly. Allowing any money for cosmetics was out of the question. Even the food was Lily compared to the orphanage very meager. Today Aunt Clara cooked soup for the whole day. Tomorrow, again, she fried pancakes or baked pies for the whole day. Lily hoped that at least at school she would be able to eat with her classmates in the school cafeteria. But no, the meal fee Aunt Clara thought was too much. So instead, she wrapped her foster daughters up with her. Still the same piece of cake, but the first time Lily really got up in arms was when she graduated from high school. Why would you want to go anywhere? Aunt Clara said firmly. I put so much effort into you, and now you're going to leave me. Girls don't need that science. You'll get married anyway. You'll have kids and then you'll abandon everything. Why don't you go be a saleswoman? There's a store near your house, 2 minutes away, and you'll get your paycheck right away. And the saleswoman lets you take home expired goods. These products will be very useful to us. Lily knew from bitter experience that it was useless to argue with her foster mother. The girl thanked fate that she had saved money in advance. She worked part-time, hiding it from Aunt Clava to walk and other people's dogs. And she even tutored children from junior high school. Lily found out the bus schedule in advance, left home at dawn, taking with her a minimum of things, her documents, and saved money, and left for the regional center. She had already turned 18, and even if Aunt Clara tries to look for her, she has no rights to return Lily. A few nights the girl slept at the train station as well. She didn't care what school to enter, as long as she got some specialty. And in the meantime to get a dormitory. Coming to the first college in the admissions office, Lily was confused. Fortunately, one of the teachers was a kind soul who talked to the girl, asked her what she could do, what she would like to do, and having heard that Lily likes to grow flowers, advised her to apply for landscape design. Unexpectedly, this choice turned out to be, as they say, an accurate shot on target. And Lily began to learn easily and with passion. Domestic problems were also solved. The college had a good hostel. Lily was put in a cozy room for 3. The roommates were good, companionable, and the girl herself did not notice how the years of study flashed by. When Lily got her diploma, she thought that she would have to work harder than the others. The other girls returned home to their parents. Some of them had gotten married in the meantime. Lily had to think about where to live and where to get the money to pay the rent. Fortunately, quite quickly she found her first clients, and soon with the help of word of mouth. Orders she began to have a lot. Now the girl could rent a modest apartment and buy herself everything she needed. Of course, the labor was not easy and mostly seasonal. In summer, Lily was busy from dawn to dusk. It was good if the customer was attentive and inviting the girl to work, would think about where she could drink tea, have a snack in the middle of the day, and wash in the evening. But many times Lily came home dead tired, dirty, and hungry. It was surprising that she had met Herbert in such an unrepresentable state. Lily was building a slide at a country house. She'd been working on it all day. She didn't think about how she was going to get home until 8 o'clock in the evening. People in this neighborhood were wealthy, they all had cars, and there was no public transportation. Lily was about to call a cab when a car pulled up beside her, and a man at least 10 years older than her offered her a ride. Lily was dense, dirty, and very uncomfortable getting into a shiny car like that. But the man didn't seem to be embarrassed by that at all. All the way they talked casually, and when they said goodbye, Herbert asked Lily to meet again. He courted her as if she were the only woman on earth, and very quickly he proposed to Lily. "I'm sure I've met the one I've been looking for all my life," he said. So why stall for time waiting for something? Before the wedding? Lily, no, and remembered David, the one she loved the most in the world. The new feeling couldn't be compared to the old one. But David was rumored to be living somewhere else in the city. He was working as a mechanic and slowly drinking himself to death. But most importantly, he wasn't looking for Lily, which meant he'd fallen out of love, so she could marry without remorse. But very quickly, after marriage, Lily realized she was in a mess. Yes, she now lived in a big, beautiful house and had enough money for everything: new outfits, her own car, traveling, not to mention good food, which meant a lot to Lily too. But Herbert turned out to be such a jealous and hot-tempered man that life with him became an agony. Lily was not only forced to quit her job, she found herself practically trapped within four walls. Before, the house had been guarded by a tall, clean-cut guy from a private security company. When Lily arrived, he was immediately replaced by an older, balding man in his 60s. There were security cameras in the house. There were surveillance cameras in the house, and soon Lily didn't dare to open the door to the mailman, or the pizza delivery guy, or anyone. And what good was it if she had her own car? She couldn't drive anywhere. If Herbert wasn't sitting next to her, another woman and in another situation immediately filed for divorce. But after Herbert had beaten Lily badly several times, he hinted that she would not have time to get help from anyone. He would just kill her. Maybe it was just a threat. But Lily believed it. She was so afraid of her husband now that as soon as he arched his eyebrows, her voice was taken away from her, and her hands began to tremble finally. He had no problem slapping her or pushing her, so that she flew to the opposite corner of the room. Lily always bruised very easily, and now she walked like a piano player at home. She had to wear clothes that covered not only her body, but also her arms and legs in the summer. Of course, with this way of life, Lily had no girlfriends, and after a few years she turned into a socially unadapted creature. Now, if she suddenly found herself alone in the city, she wouldn't know how to behave in a store or in an entertainment center. Lily felt all the time that her husband was watching her. Her movements were slowing down. They had no children, and Herbert already began to talk about the fact that it is necessary to go to the doctors and find out what is the cause. But one day, when he came home, he found Lily watching a soap opera with fascination. He couldn't escape her admiring gaze, and he decided that his wife had a crush on the actor playing the lead role. That day, Herbert was not in a particularly good mood. He had to deal with a lot of problems at work, including some not-so-pleasant ones, and he snapped. Lily had to call an ambulance. Herbert was very reluctant to let his wife go to the hospital, but the doctor cut her off. "We have to monitor her and rule out internal bleeding. Do you want your wife to die in your arms?" Before that, Lily had to lie to her heart's content that she accidentally slipped on the stairs and fell down unluckily like that. Of course, Herbert went with his wife to the hospital, but they couldn't give Lily a private room. It was all booked up, and the husband was kicked off the ward. "We have visiting hours and you can come back then." The ward manager cut him off, and we'll talk to your wife about the nature of the injuries. So far, her explanation doesn't give me much confidence. Lily didn't start to feel better until a few days later. The whole time, she was a wreck. It was very painful to move. She was put on drips. Her arm was put in a cast. "Did someone beat you up?" "Who?" asked an elderly nurse as she scrubbed the floors. Lily nodded and couldn't help herself. She cried. Husband frowningly clarified the orderly with a mop under the bed. Lily nodded again. "So run away from him, silly, before it's too late," the orderly advised. "He'll cripple you sooner or later, or just kill you." Lily knew deep down that the attendant was right. However, there was an obstacle that could not be ignored. "I have no money," she said. "And without money I won't get far. He would surely find me their heads." The poor orderly cut the conversation short. But a few hours later, she returned to the ward and handed the young woman a $100 bill. "Take it if you're thinking of leaving him. Pay me back when you can. I work hard for my money too. I should be retired by now. But how can you live on that? So I scrubbed the floors from morning till night. Thank you, Lily whispered. I'll pay you back. She didn't have a penny yet. All plans for escape had been rather distracted dreams. Now she was determined, even though she could hardly stand on her feet after her husband's beatings. She decided not to escape at dawn. The hospital woke up early too, and her absence would be noticed in an hour or so. But if she got out of the building late at night, there was a chance that she would be gone until morning, and she would have a few hours' head start. Lily put the essentials in a bag, ate everything that had been brought for dinner, though she didn't usually have an appetite for hospital porridge, and went to bed before bedtime. Unexpectedly, she dozed off. In general, the young woman felt relieved, as if the question that had long tormented her had finally been resolved. Lily awoke around midnight. She had managed to sneak out of the room unnoticed. The nurse who was on duty had gone somewhere else. Lily went down to the first floor and slipped out the side door reserved for service personnel. She knew she wasn't going to the train station. There were 2 train stations in the city, one for the railroad and one for intercity buses. But the first bus didn't leave until morning. She would have to buy a ticket with her passport. She'd be found out quickly. The railroad was even worse. There was only one train through town that went to Chicago via New York. It stopped in the evening. And that's when Lily would be intercepted by her husband. The only way out was to get to the highway and hitchhike the rest of the way. That's what she did. The first trucker put her in his truck and dropped her off the next day in a big city. Here it was easier to get lost like a needle in a haystack. One problem. Lily had given him the only bill she had. She had no idea how to ask for change in such a situation. So she found herself in a strange city alone and without money. It was impossible to go to the police. The whole story would come out. She would most likely be sent to her place of residence. Finding a job would take a few days at best. You can't just take the first job that comes along. She would have to look for a place to live, or at least a place where Lily would be paid a sum of money in advance, and she could rent a corner of the house. All the next day, the young woman wandered around the city and read the advertisements posted on bus stops and poles. Her situation was desperate. Here they offer a place for a caregiver, but she has no phone number. She can't call and make an appointment, and she has no money to pay for the call and machine. And there's no address on the ad. And another suggestion. Dumpling pilots are required, and there's even an address. But it's on the other side of town. And how do you get there? No trivia. A shuttle bus. They also offered a shelter for homeless alcoholics and drug addicts. The ad guaranteed a night's lodging, food, a job with a daily paycheck. But Lily hesitated. She imagined what kind of contingent would be there. She still felt very ill. Her arm ached, and she was dizzy with fatigue and hunger. Lily found some change in her pocket and decided to go to the store to buy at least some bread. She was out of luck. There were no cheap loaves left on sale, only expensive slices in cellophane. Nearby on the display case were different kinds of nuts, and Lily couldn't resist. Her hand reached out, as if the young woman remembered her childhood in the orphanage and David, who from time to time stole chocolates from the store for her girlfriend. But Lily is grabbed by the arm. The guard about 5 years older than her was a tall guy. "Come with me," he commanded. "But me, I'll put everything back. I haven't eaten anything in the hall yet," fed Lily. Without saying a word, he led her into the back room and told her to take off her clothes. Why? She was scared. "How do I know what else you've got in your pockets or in your bra? You women have such a huge anatomy. Get undressed. Or shall I call the police?" Burning with shame, Lily began to take off her blouse. It was very uncomfortable for her. One arm was in a cast, but she managed to pull the bra strap off her shoulder, revealing a tattoo of a dragon with a rose. "Stop," suddenly the guard said, and Lily noticed the change in his voice. "Where did you get that?" The last thing the young woman expected was for the guard to be interested in the tattoo. And this was stuffed a long time ago in the orphanage. She also said and regretted mentioning the orphanage. Now the guy will definitely think that she is a thief. After all, for the orphanage runs a bad name. Take the change. Good price for a couple of uneaten nuts. Lily almost cried. Saidi but at her the guard and hurriedly pulled out a phone. Who are you calling? Lily was frightened, but the guy didn't listen to her. Mom, he said. When Mom was picked up on the other end, she seemed to have found herself. I've regretted putting my daughter in the wrong hands my whole life. Now I can already summarize and realize that my story is unconventional. The first time I got married right after the institute, but it did not bring me happiness. We had no children, but I had a niece, Doria. My older sister moved to France on a program to work there as a nanny. She left her only daughter behind for now. She told me she'd pick her up later. She called me and told me the Americans were so smiling. You left your own child to nurse ours, and Doria grew up quietly in our home. And now I had no doubt that she would stay with us for good. It's hard to walk in heels, especially if you're not used to it. It's true that not all heels are suitable for the habit. I remember when I went on duty at a printing house in another neighborhood. In high stilettos, only to go to the theater in them. I went home barefoot. I don't care if it's the main street. I don't care if they take me for an idiot. But what bliss! And these boats are medieval instruments of torture come to life. Most of all, I wanted to unscrew the heel and throw them in the nearest garbage can. But on such high, but stable, as on my black shoes, you can walk a lot and a long time. Last year, walking was the only thing that saved me from despair. A feeling that has no right to be. What do you mean it doesn't have a right to be? Any feeling that isn't evil is worth living. And to trample for the first time breaking through the routine of everyday life and love, figuratively speaking, to step on it is not a foot. The routine was still that. Husband came from work and lay down. The dominant position was horizontal. It didn't matter what to watch Village of Fools or How to Become a Millionaire. TV good screen, big couch, soft comforts and snow. It does not matter to read a novel in the fantasy genre studied along and across or a primer forgotten on the table. Never mind sleeping or awake, but lying down, but not saying an extra word. Not participating in the life of the family at all. So I've always thought of myself as a single woman. Taking seriously for a friend this addition to the couch. The cushion didn't work, and there was still time for reflection, despite the external business. It's a waste. They say that physical work distracts from thoughts. Washing machine hums, hands rinse heavy snow under the blanket or peel potatoes, or wash floors on automatic. The head thinks and thinks. And in the end, neither from these endless affairs nor from the thoughts that do not leave neither day nor night. I want to sob and whimper, God, I'm so tired, and then lie down and die quietly. All around, life was boiling in all its manifestations. It was spring outside with a bright, tender sun. Everything was beginning to grow. And while every blade of grass was perceived as a holiday, its later will start to understand. Radish weed aside radish pro weed. And meanwhile, nettles for happiness. Its first leaves fluffy emerald birds in their special spring voices so early in the morning, when almost darkness is a little paler than the real night. Doria is waiting for me at home. She has 3 silences of her own. Silence 1, only the rustle of pages can be heard behind the lessons. 9th grade is still without a tutor. We save money. We're saving money for university. Silence 2, in front of the mirror, only the clatter of heels when turning here and there. The other day on Saturday, I wore my most expensive shoes. Of course, she wasn't working. She was standing off to the side. And guys were distracted by it, because in such a form not to rake the garbage. And for disco, a mini skirt, net tights and shoes with rhinestones. Quiet. 3rd computer game. Her favorite game. A town populated by fictional characters. If at first she played by the rules like kids play dolls, build a house, leave it, supply it, populate it about the family, now Doria entertains herself by acting out whole shows. She has, for example, show hunger. She buys a luxury mansion for hers that has everything from a telescope to a swimming pool. Everything except the refrigerator. For a while, the little people enjoy life, splashing in the jacuzzi, singing from the bandstand, playing the piano. Then they start reaching out to their mistress and asking for food. She feeds them once a day, buys a plate of pies. Who had time, he ate. After a while, the pestilence begins. To sad music, death with a sight comes for one or the other. An urn with ashes is left in place of the deceased. Daria immediately sells the urn and the house becomes haunted. For the last survivor, Daria buys the most expensive refrigerator full of food. When I ask her if she feels sorry for the computer babies, she coldly shrugs her shoulders. What's there to feel sorry for? It takes 2 minutes to make new ones. I wish I had that kind of willpower. Daria will probably have a personality like my coworker. She's an animal trainer by trade. It seems that if her life was in the circus, she'd be able to handle lions without a problem. So far, her husband has achieved a rare degree of training. She wouldn't speak to him for 2 months at a time, sending him to his mom. Despite her pleas, her boss picked her up every morning and they drove to work together. Anyway, now Peter. After 10 years of marriage, she's pure silk. Not only does everything around the house, but sees Nancy as the one and only incomparable, of which you can't even put anyone else next to her. 2 things happened in my life at that time. I got into freediving and fell unrequitedly in love. Is an adventure enough for you? Asked my other friend Miranda. She couldn't have said anything different. By then I was in my 6th year of working for Incredible magazine. Every month it came to readers. 200 pages of photo text. Where would so much incredible stuff come from? We were sent materials from all over the world. Because the requirements for content we had were small, royalties were paid correctly. But many people want to tell about unusual phenomena occurring in their neighborhoods. Some have seen with their own eyes, the whole. Some saw mysterious mirages. We processed these materials and published them. And my friend Miranda did the publicity. A lot of the space in the magazine was devoted to advertisements. My friend was a terrible neighbor, didn't dare to get out, even if someone invited her to the villa. For her, there was only her own, very comfortable apartment and office. That's why she considered my life to be literally nomadic. After all, my husband, niece, nephew, and I often traveled around the country. And then there's diving. Many people like to swim underwater, but to come into almost related contact with the depth of the dive to the limit of meters for a man, having nothing but caresses on such a dare few. I'll tell you in a nutshell why I took up swimming. I started learning as a child, spending vacations at my grandparents' place. The Black Sea in those places is very beautiful. On my trouble, I discovered a mask and fins. Why bad luck? Because I held onto the water then. I could barely swim only a few meters. And flippers are a special thing. Even for a beginner, they give you faith in your own strength. It seems that you glide along the sea surface quickly, like a dolphin, and it is impossible to drown. I came running to the still deserted beach. In the early morning, the coarse pebbles were cold, and the sea was also still cold and clear as a tear. I quickly threw off my sundress and left it on the stones and threw myself into the arms of the sea, which picked me up and carried me. You lower your masked face into the water, and you are transported to another world. Paris. Below in a silly haze, underwater landscapes change. Huge rocks, overgrown with shells, green and red algae. The slanting rays of the sun, and white transparent umbrellas and silence. You hear only your own breathing through the tube. 200 meters from the shore, a rock was hiding under the water. You can sit down, have a rest. And from the shore, the sight is fantastic. A man sits in the middle of the sea as if he weighs nothing, or he could walk on the water like a saint. I ran my fingers through the thick, fluffy seaweed that covered the rock, and then my eyes slipped off my foot and I couldn't catch it. That's how I was left completely helpless, quite far from the shore. Back I could not. After all, I couldn't hold on to the water very well, and the distance was long. I had to wait until there was someone I could call for help. In the meantime, the only thing I could hold on to was to keep the waves from washing me off the rock. And then I saw the girl, where she had swum from, and where she was going. A small black head flashed in the waves. The girl was paddling leisurely and with the confident movements of an experienced swimmer. "Help me, please," I shouted. It was embarrassing to ask, but it was even more frightening to be left without help. It's so easy to drown. I explained in a few words what had happened. The girl dived in silently. She didn't show her face for a long time. Then she surfaced and handed me my blue flipper with new speckles. "Now you can go back to shore," she said calmly, and she swam on. The same measured sweep of her arms, and soon her black head was no longer distinguishable in the waves. From that moment I realized, firstly, that I had to cope with any situation on my own. And secondly, I decided to learn to swim as well as this stranger. And I did. What's more, I began to dive to considerable depths without scuba diving. Free diving requires from a person long for several years of training and all the strength. Several times I surfaced from great depths, being on the verge of consciousness. Blue lips. The depth must be honored. The depth calls. I want to go into it and never come back. Every dive is a risk, the way athletes usually play with death. I had a period of depression after a few serious dives, claimed marks in competitions. I achieved then. The computer on my wrist showed it. But by some miracle, I pulled myself to the surface, I don't remember. And not at that depth. I was drawn downward, slipping and sliding further into that blue. Just a little bit more. And if it wasn't for my body, my mind would have stayed in the depths forever. And then I couldn't see water for a long time, not even in a glass. I thought it was the end of my normal life. But there was a man who took it upon himself to cure me. He was the head of the department in our town. His name was Ethan, and he saved me from the asylum. The doctor said, "Rest," and my first feeling was anger. "What do you mean, rest? Does resting make it go away?" That feeling of helplessness and unwillingness to live. Blossoming depression in all its glory. But the doctor kept convincing me. "I know how to cure you. There's nothing you can do. My fight is lost." She's always been a big deal to me since the first dive. And now, even though I'm back, alive, she's still got the upper hand. She's gotten inside my mind. It's drowning me. I'll help you, believe me. At the hospital, he put me in a private room. The treatment consisted of injections, which he gave me twice a day. His hands were magic. He'd come in the morning and ask how you're doing. Talk about something. And then he dropped the empty syringe in the tray. And I'm irresistible again. I want to sleep. I hug my pillow and sleep. I sleep. A respite from the nightmares that are becoming habitual. Before, in almost every dream, I saw that I overestimated their strength, lost the very point of return, and I cannot resurface. I, spreading my arms, as in a soft change, go into the depths, into the abyss. And here, for the first time, I began to sleep with a dead sleep, without heavy dreams. Ethan came in one day and I cried. He looked at my face and put the syringe away. And now, he said, we'll get better slowly. From that day on, I sat on the balcony in my bathrobe. 4th floor, he'll see? She doesn't even know how to do anything. And cried. Crying as much as you want? He said it was okay. Remember the old fairy tale about paradise? Only with tears came out of my eye a shard of the magic word mirror. I fell in love with this man, as we fall in love with our saviors, with those who delivered us from physical suffering. And my love was torn because it was unrequited. No, this man was not married, and I did not bring down anyone's family. But he valued his freedom above all else. He wanted to improve his career, travel, socialize with friends. On the other hand, I had a husband, and he didn't deserve for me to cheat on him. If Georgie had reciprocated my feeling, everything would have been solved. Simply, I would have honestly told my husband that I had fallen out of love with him, but no one promised me anything. And if I did decide to divorce, I'd be alone. I read somewhere that the true hell is loneliness, not fires, not devils, not frying pans. Loneliness. When I met Ethan, I thought I was done with loneliness forever. I'd made a friend. I didn't want to see, realize, and accept what was obviously different for Ethan. I was just a patient, shallow, unobtrusive patient who was simple and easy to relate to. Besides, he had healed me, and that too was a reason for him to treat me with warmth. But they were all wonderful and agonizing too. Those days in the hospital, we walked on paths strewn with pine needles. We sat on a bench by the pond. I'd tell something interesting from my life, thanks to the incredible. There was more than enough to go around. Ethan talked about the clinic, about his patients. There was something elusive missing from our conversations, something that would allow me to rest my head on his shoulder and close my eyes. When I got back on my feet, I went to see a psychologist. In our town, 2 husband and wife were considered the best in this field. I scored the reviews on the internet and realized that the husband is actually a wife hater. Clients sadly wrote that he opened their eyes and that it turns out in all the troubles in their lives they are to blame themselves. Why did they return to this psychologist? Again, it was a mystery to me. I went to see his wife, an attractive, well-groomed woman. About 40 years old, her name was Maria. "Love brought me here," I said. "I can only be happy for you." She smiled. Unrequited, I clarified. Love. In any case, a gift from God. And even if unrequited, it can bear fruit. Spiritual growth, wisdom, experience. Sit down, let's work. Maria. She told me to sit in the chair, cover my eyes, and relax. "What has offended you the most?" she asked, switching to you. I thought for a few moments. While Ethan was treating me, he was impeccably polite and attentive. That I was getting better. The treatment was over. It was time to get back to my life. He discharged me. I blew my nose like a little girl. And he said goodbye like a regular patient and didn't say he wanted to see me again. Didn't even ask for my phone number. I see. Maria began to speak slowly, clearly. She was suggestive. "Now it's night for you." A night when everything from the tips of your toes to your scalp hurts, but it hurts the most to breathe. It's the dying hope of his love. If you have survived this most difficult time, you will begin to heal. Where does recovery begin? You will slowly begin to remember that there are other people in the world with their own wants and needs. Maybe you have a mom who has had a sick child lately who has missed you so much. Feeling sorry for them feels like shame that you thought so little of them. The first sign of recovery. You'll start to notice that there are some nice things in the world that aren't related to your loved one. A warm bath, a good book, fine perfume. Have you gained weight? Nature has given each of us an amazing amount of strength. But if you don't want to repeat the same old pain, if you don't want to be tormented anymore, let's think together what to do so that you don't fall into this trap again. What's the difference between happy love and destructive love? Crazy love is also called crazy love because it involves inequality. You are capable of loving and your partner is not. The more you give your soul to him to awaken reciprocal love, the less you get from him. I went to Maria for a few weeks. An affair with life is more than an affair with a man. She convinced me. It includes all kinds of love of family, of home, of animals, of one's business, of a beautiful city, of good weather, and of course of men too. If one thing is taken away from you, one thing remains, and the rest I collect love stories, Maria said. Not fictional stories, but real stories that happen to people. I remember an old story printed in a magazine. A man wrote about how lonely he was. He got a lot of letters. He chose a woman with 5 children. A year later, the magazine published pictures of them in a cramped apartment. They are drinking tea in the kitchen deep in the night when the children are finally asleep and they are happy. Or the story of 2 old people who met in a polyclinic, she in her 80s, he in his 80s. So what? That they found each other only now. Love brings joy regardless of age. And if you're shaking your head right now, you won't meet anyone like me. Think if you didn't know he existed. You'd live in the world and not grieve. Would look at men with wide open eyes and look for your destiny. So search, believe in yourself. It's not easy. It takes a lot of work to bring out the best in yourself. That only then will you feel that you live in complete harmony with yourself, that you're happy. I guess God heard Marina and sent me another version of happiness. I realized I was pregnant. For years, my husband and I had dreamed of having a child, but something prevented me from rejoicing with all my soul. I guess I had a premonition of the future. Time after time, the doctors didn't like the ultrasound results. And I realized that probably everything I had been through had taken its toll on the baby and my diving to greater depths, and the medications I was given at the sanitarium. In the end, when my daughter was born, I was told that she would not be a full human being. Everyone convinced me to give her up, from the midwife at the birth center to my husband. Have you found out you're not infertile yet? The doctors assured me, "You'll take care of yourself. You will lead a healthy life and give birth to a normal child." Is this girl capable of destroying your family? Men can't stand living in a family where children are constantly sick with no hope of recovery. For a bitter minute, I agreed, signed a waiver to give up the baby. I was burning with guilt. I tried to find out something about my daughter at the orphanage where she'd gone, but they told me pretty quickly that the girl was adopted. She's hopelessly ill. I exclaimed, "So some kind people found her." The headmistress shrugged her shoulders. They decided to make sure that the girl, the rest of her century, to live in good conditions. She didn't know my story and didn't want to get into it. My guilt was compounded even more. My sister finally obtained citizenship in Paris and took her daughter to live with her. Daria was leaving with enthusiasm. Young people love to travel. And fate brought Ethan and me together again. Ethan did not like holidays for the imposed obligation to have fun. He didn't like Christmas, especially not as a human being. This is not law-abiding Germany, where not only every visit is scheduled, but even every smile, gift, and candle burning. We have a hand here, a shoulder unfolded. And the fact that they invented these Christmas vacations in imitation of Europe, so it is a punishment in general. People simply consider it their duty to scroll through a month's family budget in the first 3 days. And what to do with the rest of the days? He doesn't know. And those who vacation in Courchevel are out of the question. They are few, and they have their own parallel world, which has nothing to do with the lives of ordinary citizens. And it's these ordinary citizens who become the patients of their department. This time they stayed with Jack and a recent medical school graduate. Of course, if Ethan had his way, he would have banned paid medical education. And to get it into the heads of some smart heads and lawmakers, he'd suggest that they and their relatives get their surgeries from the likes of Jack. But the sneaky part is that they would be treated by luminaries of learning. Jack attends surgeries and learns from senior colleagues. The process seems to start from scratch. He doesn't know the most basic things. And if anything, he'll honestly admit he hasn't been to any of these lectures. If Jack ever becomes a normal surgeon, Ethan can safely go to the theater as a potential ballet dancer. Jack flew into the resident with his eyes popping out of his orbits in horror. Ethan screamed he's in the emergency room with a man brought in and blood pouring out of his stomach. Massive bleeding. "Look, hurry up, I'm scared." Ethan ran to the emergency room. There, a citizen lay on a stretcher and quietly moaned, pressing his hand to his stomach. His plaid shirt was soaked with blood from massive bleeding. The casualty was perhaps a little too ruddy. Ethan lifted, tugged at its material, and saw that the citizen's stomach was mechanized. But the persistent odor of booze would have knocked anyone off their feet. Blood was pooling from a deep cut on his right arm and a narrow trickle dripped from his broken nose. The man opened one eye and, seeing Ethan, uttered, "Doctor, it was Alex who bottled me." The bastard hit me in the head, and then Jack stood next to him with his arms folded across his chest in prayer. Nurse Helen put a tourniquet on the man, and the sufferer was sent to the trauma center under his shirt. Was it too weak to look? Ethan Jack asked, walking down the corridor. But so much blood, so much blood. The future surgeon shook his head sadly, started cheerfully muttered Ethan, sinking down on the couch in the resident. "It's 9:55 on the clock. Good if there are no major surprises and major surgeries, Assistant Jack wouldn't wish on an enemy. I'm gonna have to pull some of my coworkers away from the holiday table. I hate to do that." Ethan opened the refrigerator in the far corner, lurking, donated by one of the grateful patients, a bottle of Armenian cognac, 7 years old. If there's no emergency, at 12 o'clock he and Jack will have a small drink. In the corridor, the patients sleep quietly. In the meantime, Ethan has Jack make sandwiches. We should at least get a little something to eat while things are quiet. Jack hustles obsequiously. Deftly, he sliced a clear slice of ham and stacked them on slices of fresh loaf. 2 scoops of coffee for you, as always. He asked respectfully, opening the can in the cafe. Ethan nodded and thought that Jack might make a good bartender. No sooner had Ethan eaten the first bite of his sandwich than there was a knock at the door. The gray-haired head of Benjamin's patient from Ward 6 peeked through the crack. "Doctor, I need an enema." "It's just that on the second day, nothing is working. It's so hard." "All right, I'll tell you." Nurse Ethan nodded and told Jack to find Helen, who disappeared, probably gone to her friend Kate. "Urology. You won't. You'll be giving your grandmother an enema yourself," he threatened. "Jack, I don't know how to do that." He was scared standing in the doorway. "You'll learn." Ethan encouraged him. 10 days ago, Benjamin was brought to the ward in the most serious condition, 80-year-old woman. As it turned out, she had eaten a guest and some lard, and she was twisted. So the poor woman could not breathe, could not charm. Ultrasound showed that her gallbladder was full of stones and needed emergency surgery. "Maybe we shouldn't, doctor," moaned Benjamin, whose cheeks were the same color as the hospital sheets. "I'm 80 years old and still dying. But not this one. You could have done it at home in your own bed without me." Ethan cut him off and told him to get the operating room ready. 3 days later, Benjamin was already shuffling down the hospital corridor and was taking a keen interest in life. During her rounds, she didn't miss an opportunity to ask Ethan if he knew anything about his marital status. "That cute old guy from the room that was operated on a week ago? I don't see anyone coming to see him," Benjamin sighed. "Perhaps he is a childless widower," Ethan suggested thoughtfully, and saw the old woman's eyes brighten. "Did I find it?" Jack exclaimed, as excitedly as if it were the latest scientific discovery. "Helen and Kate were sitting at our place. They were already celebrating." Ethan asked angrily. "I don't know," Jack mused, but Helen had already taken Benjamin away. In the emergency room, an incredibly made-up girl in a scribe's coat was sitting in a 3 posterior position, complaining of a sharp pain in her right side. Said ER Dr. Andrew, "Most likely appendicitis." Ethan tells the maiden to lie down on the couch. With a slight movement of her shoulder, she threw her singers to the floor and found herself in the most unclothed clothes. Only a sequined bra and the same sparkling thong. What kind of masquerade? It's not a month. It's May. Ethan was surprised. Cigarettes. Behind the counter, the girl twisted right at work. The girl stood there. "And what kind of work uniform do you have?" Ethan asked innocently. "It's not what you think," she said, embarrassed. "I didn't think anything," Ethan said. "I just assumed you were from the Walrus Society." "We were invited to a corporate party to striptease," she explained. "They promised to pay us well. When I was 100, I got a jolt of electricity." She put her hand on the bottom of her belly. The gynecologist was already looking. Andrew said hurriedly, in response to Ethan's questioning look, "It's not their department." Jack stared at the guitar-shaped curve of the stripper's body. He seemed willing to study anatomy all he wanted at this point. Half an hour later, Ethan walked out of the operating room. Appendicitis isn't the most complicated surgery. Didn't need to disturb any of his colleagues. Jack was fine. At 11:45, Ethan looked into Ward 4, where the strippers had been taken after the operation. The girl opened her eyes, and when she saw Ethan, she suddenly cried. "Who'd want me so ugly now?" Ethan raised his eyebrows, but with his stomach positioned. The sickly woman explained. "First of all, no one crucified anyone." Ethan suddenly took offense. "I did a cosmetic one. It came out butt to butt. Slava Zaitsev would be jealous." In a week at least, we were left again. He was quiet and added, "But I wouldn't advise it. Or he'll get a left side disorder, and we have no work to do, and they won't pay." "I am now crushed," sighed the girl. "Why have you sued them?" "For personal injury." Ethan winked and left the room. Room 5. He looked in because the lights were on and there were invited but clearly excited voices. And it was a good thing he looked in. On the bedside table in front of the patient Zhilieva, recently operated on for a stomach ulcer. Yes, there was a good bowl of homemade dumplings and an unopened bottle of vodka. What the hell is that? At the risk of Ethan flying into the room. "Who brought it?" "My wife." Confused, Zhiliev. "He ate the feast?" asked Ethan, pouring cold sweat and pointing at the dumplings. "Already ate." Zhiliev didn't have time to spell, pushing the bowl away. Ethan handed the bowl to Jack, who flew at Jack's scream and told him to immediately send everything to the food waste tank. and I'll personally give this bowl to your wife tomorrow, Ethan said. And the vodka, too, he added, grabbing the bottle. I'll explain to her what your wife would have been if you tasted all that. And who? Giliev was surprised. A widow of vodka, broth, kefir. Ethan cut him off and headed for the resident's room. There he found Vasilenko enthusiastically devouring hot dumplings. The clock read 11:55. Bon appetit, Ethan barked. Yes, I just tasted it. Jack excused himself and reluctantly went to throw away the dumplings. He and Jack had barely had a shot of brandy before a frightened Helen flew into the resident. Ethan, there's Santa Claus being brought in, shouted she. I didn't order it. Ethan was confused, unless it was to make Jack happy. Insulting Ethan, Jack's egotistical response. Don't you get it? Helen got worried. He's in serious condition. See for yourself. Santa Claus was lying on a gurney in his red sweater and white beard. Red watercolor circles stood out sharply on her pale cheeks. Nearby, shaking violently, was a frightened elf in a white minicoat. A frightened elf in a white mini fur coat. She held in her hands a snow-white beard and his red and white hat. Since 6 o'clock, we've been going on calls, the elfess explained confusedly. Children are happy, and parents are always trying to give them treats. And he has such a temper that he can't refuse anyone. I told him a long time ago that enough is enough, so he doesn't listen. Who are you to him? Ethan inquired, examining the patient. The granddaughter is an elf. Ah, that's me in the script. That's my wife. They decided to make a little extra work. Examined long ago. Last asked Ethan last year. He had chronic pancreatitis and needed to diet, and he broke it. Violated is an understatement, Ethan said thoughtfully. Santa Claus gave him a shot and put it in IV. An elven girl sat next to him and held his hand. A white mini fur coat hung on the headboard of the bed, reminiscent of the angel wings that served. Ethan gestured to her in the hallway without her New Year's Eve attire in a short skirt and sweater. She resembled a student who had run away from a lecture. If his condition doesn't improve, we'll prepare for surgery, Ethan warned her quietly. He will live in the neighborhood in her eyes, she asked. Of course he will, Ethan reassured the girl. I've never seen Santa die of any kind of pancreatitis. From the resident, he called the head of the department just in case, and warned that a serious patient had been admitted. The chief promised to come if necessary. By morning, Santa Claus was feeling better, and Ethan told the elf that she could go home. Then he looked into the stripper's room and was surprised to find Jack there. He was carefully checking the poor girl's stitching, and without Ethan noticing, he was passionately telling her how many seriously ill patients he had saved from imminent death. Happy New Year, said Ethan and added Namakai, poking her in the side some more. Bae, what is Jack talking about? Happy New Year. Turning in for his shift, Ethan thought that this time he had had a pretty quiet New Year's Eve shift, and then they bring me in with the same trivial appendicitis. After looking at those who were to take over the shift, Ethan took over the operation himself. It means a lot to the patient. He's in a lot of pain, and with a stranger next to him at the time, it's doubly scary. You don't know what to expect from him. But with Ethan, I always knew that everything would be all right. I remembered those days in the hospital as a blissful vacation. The shots were good for the pain. My favorite doctor came to see me several times a day, and I didn't owe anyone any chores either at home or at work. I had time to think things over carefully. I realized that my husband and I could exist in parallel without interfering with each other, that loneliness would be my companion probably forever. My hopeless love began to slowly recede. The pain dulled. Or maybe, on the contrary, the feeling became another deeper feeling. I no longer wanted Ethan for myself. I didn't want him to be my most important thing. Now I knew he was there and he was doing well. I was discharged, and in the spring, I found out I was pregnant. At the ultrasound, this time we went together with my husband. The doctor turned out to be a man, thin, skinny. They say he used to work in a maternity hospital. At first, if he had to help move a woman in labor on a gurney, the midwives called him James, and then they were convinced he couldn't do that kind of work. That's what James said. They're sliding the probe. I think we're pretty flat on the belly. Here's one heart. Here's another heart, another head. What's that? I really disliked such questions during the examination and noticed how pale my husband turned. You will have twins, dear, said the doctor. Not 100% sure, but almost certainly. A boy and a girl. Outside, my husband took me under his arm. See, he said excitedly, this is fate. Instead of that inferior girl we gave up, she sends us 2 children at once. In such cases, they say that God gives with both hands. Suddenly, I ripped his hand away. What if these children are not born perfect? I asked. We'll put them in good hands again. How can you and I talk about God? After all, maybe our girl grows up normal, pleasing her foster parents. We've been told that can't happen. You know it happens. Doctors make mistakes sometimes. And even if she's gone, we'll never know. It'll haunt me for the rest of my life. We didn't talk the rest of the way. I did give birth to a boy and a girl. I left my favorite dives. I didn't care about that anymore, except to the sea. We could sometimes get away with the kids, but the country was taking a turn for the worse. There was another crisis, and we bought a villa. If my husband thought that our twins are compensation received from fate for the child we lost, I thought that the new villa is compensation for the one that tormented me all my childhood and adolescence. Villa Mom was given when she was expecting me, and not just so on, and her friend who worked in the house, and repeated under a lying stone water does not flow. These plots of land knocked out Mom, and in the 8th month looked at a plot of clay, and in the road 10 minutes walk from her factory. And she cried. Really? Said the father. You know how we are here all arranged and became not only my parents, but all the factory workers. Happy owners of hell knows what, but their inch of land to build a garden city. My father built it in his own way. He said something very obscene on my tongue. For instance, he had a cellar in the cabin. You open the hatch and underneath is a square room 2 meters high. The empty one jumps out, and there is another hatch in the floor, and under it there is another such 2-meter square room, and again without a ladder. And there's potatoes, baths. I still don't know how my father got down there. Maybe he jumped down and pulled himself up on a rope with buckets in his teeth. But nothing's been stolen from us in a quarter of a century. Thieves opened the hatch first. They'd see it was empty, and they'd leave, disappointed. Once they could not contain their feelings and wrote on the wall of the cabin in big blue letters, goat. That's what we've been calling it ever since, villa, villas, goat. But kind of like Pippi Longstocking had a chicken. And my dad also raised chickens. He'd buy chickens, spread a few bags of millet on the floor, put a pot of water on the floor, lock up the house and leave. He'd come back and they'd be all grown up. They wandered not in yellow down, but in white feathers. The chickens grew up quiet and without problems. Mom loved the villas to the point of madness. At one time, she chose the institute on the principle that would not leave the city. And in the city was one polytechnic, and my mom, instead of going to any university biofaculty or agricultural, became an engineer. And for more than 30 years, she settled down in the design office. And so after a full day in the red-hot reinforced concrete thighs, Mom would break out in the evening, crushed and goat. She could graft 25 new branches onto one apple tree. She was chewed out, even sticking her dry sagebrush into the ground. Although around the plot allocated for summer houses were solid chemical plants, not caterpillars. Not even the worms didn't survive. After the factory emissions, probably the vegetables and fruits that grew here weren't useful. And if they were tested, they'd be off the charts in terms of different chemical compounds. But my sister and I grew up on it. The harvests, against all odds, were spectacular. Just a sea of strawberries and raspberries, pears, apples. We never had a car, and we had to carry the harvest home ourselves. So when I remember summer, I'd always have a bucket of cherries in one hand and a bucket of currants in the other, and with all that weight a long walk under the hot sun to the bus stop. And my sister with bags with all sorts of strong carrots. And in the summer, we always turned off elevators and hot water. So we had to carry the crops up to the 8th floor. And here you are dirty, tired, angry. There's no warm water to wash yourself, and the crops still have to be processed. Such a quantity won't fit in the refrigerator. And without a refrigerator, it's lost. I remember my sister came in to make apple juice. I was juicing. It was bouncing and vibrating on the table. How much juice did you squeeze? It's bouncing and vibrating on the table. And everything's gingerly singing. And the walls and the ceiling, and my sister's all upside down. Even her glasses are splattered. And she curses in a way that would make the laborers rest. Where did that come from? And then my sister and I insisted and sold the villa. My sister hated it. I didn't like to work the land at that time either. A neighbor bought it to combine 2 plots. That's how much my mom's teeth cost at that time, which she had done in a private office. But the teeth were uncomfortable. They were more and more in the glass. And then our dog turned the glass upside down and ate the teeth. I didn't marry the children. In the summer, we now lived in a cottage where my little ones could run barefoot. It was good that they grew up alone. The neighbors had no children. But my daughter and son were not bored without peers. They had enough of each other, although the twins were born just 5 minutes apart. They were very different, Anna and Max. Anna, as they say, is a princess. She was always a terribly fidgety child, and to force her to sit still and do things quietly, I would pull out my wedding dress and put it on her. It seemed so unimaginably beautiful to Anna that she would freeze and be afraid to move. And she'd sit there for an hour or two. All so beautiful. She was not yet 2 years old when we went for a walk in the city center, and I took her to a wedding dress salon out of sheer wit. There was my dress on Flower Boulevard. Not the only one. My God, it was like a savage who had prayed for his crystal beads all his life, and suddenly found himself in a shop full of costume jewelry. Anna grabbed the 2 nearest dresses with a dead grip and howled, "Mine." We managed to take her away, only by promising that in another store dress even better. So my husband and I took her to several more stores and only then lured her to the bus stop. And then she howled all the way home for the hour we drove. And for Christmas we gave her her own dress, an airy princess dress made of white netting with stars and turnovers. It was a delight. It can't be told and can't be described. The trouble started when it was time to take the dress off. She was only 2 years old at the time. Time to eat and bedtime. So do we shake Anna out of the dress? And from then on, until she grew out of that outfit. My daughter's greatest happiness was to dress up as a princess. Max is different, completely indifferent to clothes. It's hard to convince him to change from dirty to clean. His main hobby is animals, anything from a butterfly to an elephant. Of course, my son rarely sees elephants, only when we go to the zoo. And it all started with the fact that being very young, my son was sick. He lay quite sick and miserable and asked for a rabbit. In case you didn't know, the only way to have fun with a fever is a rabbit. When I got my paycheck, I went to get a rabbit. Hare at that time in the city had when I ran a few stores and only in the last saw this creature. In the cage sat a rabbit dwarf, small, white, the size of a rat. I bought it, brought it in. Max, of course, was in complete delight and was afraid to breathe on him. In the morning, everything was fine, but in the afternoon, the rabbit fell on its side and lay down. Only the whiskers move a little, and he snores a little audibly. We call the vet. They say bring, but it is clear that the hare to the hospital will not reach the hospital. Max is squatting nearby and wipes off his cheeks. Here's large fenced. I took the animal, put it in a box. Let it rest, I say. Really just did not know what to do. Half an hour later, I see Sat Bunny washed up, falling from weakness, went to the feeder to eat, and fell asleep, coming back to the saucer with the food in a ball like a kitten. Turns out he was stressed from the extra attention. Then, when I decided to go to the orphanage and find out something about my daughter, Christmas was approaching. I wasn't feeling very well. My head and shoulders ached. I guess all illnesses are a reflection of the way we live. I had too much on my shoulders, and I had a lot of heavy thoughts in my head. We hadn't bought a Christmas tree yet, and the kids were pestering me the day before, asking if I'd forget to bring the forest beauty in time. And on that day, our employee said that Christmas trees for journalists would be free of charge, and the national park had already allocated them. They were brought, and they are lying in the garage. You can take them. I'm off. I am glad that the epic of the previous year will not be repeated. We almost got screwed then. At first, there was a wild quantity of Christmas trees, and they were sold everywhere. The market was like a lumberyard. And then either it turned out that the trees were not quite legal, or the traders lost hope of selling the goods and left. But a few days before Christmas, there were no more trees, neither live nor artificial. And Anna and I stood in the middle of the market, looked at the dirty snow with vicious needles, and thought that all the first year without. And then, as in Soviet times, comes a woman and whispering asks you a Christmas tree together with us overestimated, still unfamiliar father and daughter. And in the dirty, empty barracks, they had 2 trees on the floor. One still looked like a Christmas tree, but the other had 2 branches, one at the top and one at the bottom. And we carried this fir tree with a stick. Then we sat down with it at the bus stop and called my husband, who had been sent to look for a Christmas tree in other parts of the city. We got one, only you meet us because we're not carrying it. We sat there and hid it behind our backs because we were embarrassed that it was so ugly. And everyone thought we were hiding it because we were greedy and didn't want to tell them where they sold them. It was the last Christmas tree in town. We took it as a basis because at the dacha we have a spruce, which my mother brought in a scarf from near Street Petersburg, from the Ship Grove. The fir tree has already grown taller than the house. We cut off a few branches from her and screwed to our freak. And now you can choose the trees of your choice. That's great. We don't have much room in the house. All the rooms are crammed with furniture. The only place we can put a tree is on the table. So I asked in advance that they get me the smallest tree they could find. I was passing by the bazaars. There were some tiny Christmas trees there, but I thought that Leshka would bring a Thumbelina. I'm going into the garage. Anyway, if I stand on a chair, I can reach the top of the lowest Christmas tree with my raised arm. Our male coworkers, they said they drank it. Executed before Christmas. So for some reason I felt bitter that I just waved my hand and went. I didn't know why I got on the bus and went to the orphanage. Of course, they wouldn't let me go any farther than the watch. After all, I had no prior arrangement with anyone. And passing by, the educator only threw that the secret of adoption is protected by the state. And I will never know what kind of family took my child in. And then a miracle happened. Anyway, I can't interpret it any other way. The old nanny who was mopping the floor left her mop and looked at me. Are you that stupid girl who swam out of before she abandoned the baby? Aya, do you remember me, even though I'm an old woman with a bad memory? I can tell you the truth, but I don't want you to run around in my generation. What are you talking about? I don't get it. Well, you won't complain to all the authorities that they cheated you for no reason that our bosses are in trouble. What about my girl? I got cold feet. I was cheated. She's dead. Your daughter is alive. The nanny squeezed the rag and wounded around the mop again. She's grown up all right. Not even sick at all. Only nobody took her in and adopted her. She grew up in these walls. She finished school and moved away. Where to? I guess I couldn't control my voice at that moment, because the woman on watch looked back at us. I don't know about that. You didn't give her a name, did you? If you gave up on her right away, why are you crying? It's too late now. Her name is Lily. Maybe she's married now. I was already crying. I would have come to my senses. I would have taken her. That's why the nurse said that different moms come here and make scandals. And our teachers have been beaten up. That's why we try to say that their children are no longer here. How am I gonna find her now? And here's a clue, she had a boy. And once they ran away from the orphanage together to a tattoo parlor, they beat a dragon and rose on her shoulder. They'd fought a lot, then the teachers. But she didn't remove the tattoo and probably wears it today. It's a hard life here, Mama. In winter, we barely managed to get the boiler room repaired. There was a glacier in the bedrooms, and our headmistress doesn't catch mice. The kids complain that they're cold, and she said get a second blanket. At home, I did not answer the questions of my husband's children. I lay down and turned my face to the wall. I could not imagine what my girl had become, because I had hardly seen her. For some reason, I remembered my own youth. It was cold in our dormitory at the university, too. In my first year, in September, I lived alone in our local room. The students were sent to work on the collective farm, and we were left to clean the classrooms and the dean's office. I remember evenings when, having collected from all 5 beds green and blankets with crimson stripes around the edges, I folded under them with my teeth and warmed my hands over the electric stove. The stove was illegal. Cooking was supposed to be done on the only 3-burner electric stove on the floor. Only one of the burners could bring food to a boil. And you could not turn away, move away, go to get onions, salt. Everything was stolen from the pot. A piece of chicken, half a raw potato, so half a raw potato. Yesterday's applicants, we were still children. We had to get used to the fact that for potatoes we had to go to the market, to the other end of the city, and we would not see milk at all, because bottled milk in stores is bought up in 2 hours, and bottled in the evenings you can get only in the outskirts of the stores. And if someone from the dormitory wanted to make mashed potatoes and began to sip potatoes, he was snidely asked if you have milk. Usually the potatoes were just mashed with water and butter. What we ate then? In the morning we thinly sliced onions and poured mayonnaise on them and put them on a piece of bread. In the evenings we cooked chicken soup and occasionally from the scholarship allowed ourselves to go into dumplings. It's expensive, variable, but it's still crowded because the dumplings are delicious. We stand at the tail end. The lines are long. From time to time the cook comes over to them and we see what they hold in their hands. If it's mitten-sized, we hang it up. The line sighs disappointedly. If it's a colander, it's a sit-down. And those who are first in line now will get their portions. And me and my girlfriend will be at a table in a dark corner. You pour in your plate on the smoking dumplings. Half a cup of sour cream each to keep you satiated for a long time. My girl in kindergarten must have lived on hunger too. Then I remembered the library where I spent a lot of time during my school years. It occupied one wing of the opera and ballet theater building, and in the other wing there was a choreographic school. The girls and boys there also lived in boarding school. I imagine how in the evenings these girls ran on the floor of dark staircases, tangled in down and shawl, because it's cold here. I saw it all as if it were his. Their shapely legs in point shoes, and their hair tightly tied at the back of their heads, and I could hear what they were saying in the bedrooms. And soon they'll be dancing the Nutcracker because Christmas is coming. What can we get ourselves for Christmas? There's no makeup in the stores. I mean, they sell mascara. It's a block of black stuff as hard as granite that you have to thaw out before you can put on makeup. It's not like now, when everyone's excited about you and you're excited about the furniture. From the gypsies who occasionally sweep with their skirts near the stores, you can get polished shadows or lipstick, even in the bluest and lilac colors. Under the dead man, we buy perfume. They were magic at that time. You could perfume a sweater and then wash it dry. And there was still a faint odor. How much was there? Watercolors, with a lower odor, or Romeo and Juliet in Riga. 2. Boxed bottles on white silk. Juliet smells like jasmine. Just before the holiday, everyone in the group drops 50 cents each and raffles off a bottle of champagne that someone has gotten, because there is no champagne in the stores either. I remember taking my children to the theater and what a celebration it was for them. We saw Silva. We were sitting in the front row. One of the characters dropped a champagne glass and it shattered. And then the dancers come out. If they were wearing shoes. No, point shoes. The stage is tiny and the dancers have to waltz right into the shards. At the very last moment, one of the artists leaned over and in one movement all this glass with a comb in the palm of his hand. And then Boney M. They got into a fight, and Boney screamed. Careful, he has a new disease shaking. Max whispers to Mom, what 3 bitches he's got, where it's shorter. I covered my face and sobbing. The librarian looks on with laughter. And then Silva swung his black bow over us and feathers flew on our heads. That's the kind of theater lovers we were. I could never agree with those people who think that time flows slowly. For me, it was always galloping. I think I just took my kids to first grade. Here we are with parents standing under the office door and waiting to pick up our kids. We won't notice how 11 years will fly by, one of the moms said then. I didn't believe her, but she was right. Before we knew it, it was graduation night. And if with Max everything was solved, he just didn't care in what suit to go to the ball, then with Anna we chose different options for so long. In the end, we had 2 dresses for the ceremonial part of the blue puffy. Huffy daughter looked like a queen in this dress. And we also bought a small black dress, which was comfortable to dance at the disco. Anna said right away that she would go to New York. Max chose the law school in our city. I realized that my daughter and son's childhood was over. The chicks are leaving the nest, and that's the way it should be. But before we parted, I warned the children that we had an important conversation to have. I didn't inform my husband that I was going to tell Anna and Max. He'd long since given up on our first child. Blurred it out of his memory. To him it was just some unpleasant incident that happened in such and such a year. But I knew I'd be tormented for the rest of my life by the fact that I'd given up my child. So I honestly told my kids that they had an older sister. Except we'll probably never find her. I can't even tell you what she looks like, I said with infinite sadness. The only time I ever saw her, her hair was dark and her eyes were blue. But then she was a newborn baby, and who knows what she's like now? The only thing more or less accurate. On her shoulder, she has a tattoo of a dragon holding a rose in its mouth. Anna was amazed. Mom, but how did you decide to give up a child like that? Max and I were sick as children too, and you nursed us back to health. You cared for each one of us. It never occurred to you to get rid of us. That word "get rid of us" stabbed me. And didn't Daddy object? The daughter went on. Did he have to convince you that everything was manageable? It's all treatable now. Your dad, I asked bitterly. He made me do it, actually. I've been told from all sides that it's hard. A sick child. What was I supposed to give birth to? According to the doctors, would put an end to our family. We would never be able to live a normal life again. Everyone said the right and reasonable thing. But I almost immediately began to regret my decision. But it was too late to fix anything. I had been lied to and told that my little girl had been adopted. And it turns out that this did not happen, and she grew up in the cold, stuffy walls of the orphanage. I bet she wasn't fed and abused. She suffered because she wasn't wanted. The people closest to her have given up on her. Anna finally realized how hard it was for me to say all this. She ran over and hugged me. It's okay, she said. Fate will still be on our side. We'll find Lily, I'm sure. If I graduated from law school, I'll have a better chance of finding out about her, Max encouraged. All I could do was cover my face with. I didn't inform my husband that I was going to tell Anna and Max. He'd long since given up on our first child. Blurred it out of his memory. To him it was just some unpleasant incident that happened in such and such a year. But I knew I'd be tormented for the rest of my life by the fact that I'd given up my child. So I honestly told my kids that they had an older sister. Except we'll probably never find her. I can't even tell you what she looks like, I said with infinite sadness. The only time I ever saw her, her hair was dark and her eyes were blue. But then she was a newborn baby, and who knows what she's like now? The only thing more or less accurate. On her shoulder, she has a tattoo of a dragon holding a rose in its mouth. Anna was amazed. Mom, but how did you decide to give up a child like that? Max and I were sick as children too, and you nursed us back to health. You cared for each one of us. It never occurred to you to get rid of us. That word "get rid of us" stabbed me. And didn't Daddy object? The daughter went on. Did he have to convince you that everything was manageable? It's all treatable now. Your dad, I asked bitterly. He made me do it, actually. I've been told from all sides that it's hard. A sick child. What was I supposed to give birth to? According to the doctors, would put an end to our family. We would never be able to live a normal life again. Everyone said the right and reasonable thing. But I almost immediately began to regret my decision. But it was too late to fix anything. I had been lied to and told that. So he rammed into an old 8. But it was the dead driver who was found guilty of the accident. Allegedly, he should have given way. The young son of a wealthy family paid for the funeral. That's how he got off. The second case was about the same. Drunken officials on a motorboat went for a walk on one of the islands and managed to crash into an inflatable boat with a whole family in it, a father and mother and a child. The head of the family was injured, fell overboard, and his body was not found until several days later. The officials got away with it. The motor driver received a suspended sentence, and again the dead man was found guilty. Allegedly, he'd been drinking and failed to yield the right of way. "Can't be an investigator anymore," Max said afterward. "I'm doing my own research. I know who is to blame in this or that case. And the blame falls on completely different people. That's enough. I quit. And my son went to work as a security guard in a store, even though it didn't pay much. And the profession of security guard became, to put it mildly, not prestigious. Max still hasn't gotten married, even though my girlfriends tried to match him with their daughters. And I don't insist that my son rush to have a family. Let it happen in its own time. And I divorced my husband. I just couldn't take it anymore. The loneliness of being alone together. We had completely lost understanding of each other, and what filled my soul with bitterness did not touch him at all. At the registry office, we were persuaded to delay our decision. You've lived together for so many years. Do you really want to be alone now, when old age is already staring you in the face? Your children will have their own lives anyway. Would you be able to support each other? We heard you, but I insisted on a divorce. We split the apartment, got a 2-bedroom for our 3 and little family. The son took his father's side. They were always close. And now I have my own corner in the former dormitory. A 10-square-meter room with a tiny hallway. On one side of the bathroom, on the other, a kind of kitchen, a cubbyhole, which can hardly fit one person. But the center of the city opposite the stores. Next to the park and the second floor. I'm getting ready for old age. I won't have to climb stairs if the elevator goes out, or walk far for bread and kefir. I've resigned myself to the fact that I'll live out my life alone. Suddenly Max called me and almost shouted into the phone, "Mommy, she's found. The girl with the dragon and the rose." Lily sat idly in the back room. She was sure that nothing good would come of her attempt to sneak a few nuts in the store. Most likely, the guard would call the police and she would be fined something. Her name will be on the police report. Sooner or later, Herbert will find her, and when he does, he'll force her back into his house and beat her half to death, and a restraining order. The guard didn't say another word. He stood in the doorway of the back room and was definitely afraid Lily would get in somewhere. Sometimes female voices called out to him, but he just waved them away. And half an hour later, a middle-aged woman came into the little room. She was very pale and looked at Lily with her eyes, a shaken person. The last thing she looked like was an angry shopkeeper, and Lily didn't know what to think. "What's your name?" asked the woman. Lily gave her first and last name. After all, there was no point in hiding them. The woman flinched slightly. "Are you married?" Lily wanted to answer was, but the woman did not wait for those words. "You had a different maiden name." Hurriedly she asked, and when Lily named her, the stranger covered her eyes. "Did you grow up in an orphanage?" she said in a tone of assertion. "How do you know?" Lily wondered. "We need to talk. Max, please see that no one enters this room." The woman sat down on the chair the guard had placed for her. She was quiet for a few minutes. "I don't know where to start," she admitted. "We could do a test. I guess that's what it's gonna take, but I'm pretty sure I'm your birth mother. You may never forgive me. I can already see that life hasn't spoiled you, but you me. If you're not hard right, you'll regret it if you don't do everything you could have expected, Lily." But not what happened to her. The guard didn't send her to the police station. Instead, a woman sat across from her and begged her to listen. "Speak up," Lily said. The woman started from afar. She talked about how she had married without much love, how she had gotten caught up in the routine of everyday life when she was still young and wanted a thrill, how she got into extreme sports and achieved something. And then the records were a time of pregnancy, and the doctors assumed that the child is terminally ill. "I waited many years," the woman said. "If it is impossible to correct the mistake, then at least to find you and apologize. My husband and I committed a betrayal, and we betrayed a defenseless child, so it is impossible to justify us. Then we had normal, healthy children. We raised them. Max, your brother, Anna is married and lives in New York. My husband and I recently separated. What he and I did was forever between us. So now I'm alone. And if there's anything I can do for you." Lily was silent. She was confused and didn't know what to say. "Your life has been very difficult." The woman still kept her eyes from her or shrugged her shoulders. "But of course, there is not much fun in an orphanage, although children can find something good in any environment. Don't be so hard on yourself. As you can see, I grew up in spite of everything, got an education. I was even on my own 2 feet for a while. And the fact that things have fallen apart in my life now, it's not your fault. Maybe I don't have the right to ask." The woman looked at Lily from head to toe for the 100th time. "But you have a place to live." "I don't right now," Lily answered bluntly. "But I hope it's only temporary and everything will eventually fall into place." "Come with me," said the one who called herself her mother. "My apartment is more than modest, of course, but at least I have a roof over my head. We have much to tell each other. You, Max, on the other hand, I would ask you not to say anything to your father. It's been over for him for years, and he doesn't need to know." That night, Lily and her mother couldn't sleep for a long time. Her mother had fed the girl enough, laid out a cot for her, and put fresh linen on it. But they talked and talked even though the hands of the clock ran far past midnight. Lily told about her years of life in the orphanage, about her friends, about her teachers, evil and kind, about how she had become a landscape designer to create beauty with her own hands. Her mother touched her hand. "I have a villa. It's yours now." "Thank you," Lily whispered. About Herbert, she told briefly it was too painful to remember. But she confessed that she was afraid he would find her. "You have a brother now. He'll be able to protect you." "Well, I don't know," Lily said incredulously. "I don't want to have to protect you from my ex-husband. He's got a lot of power and a lot of money." The next day at the family council, they decided that Lily would go to the villa and live there a little rest, come to her senses, and then it would be clear. Although the mother no longer doubted that she had found her daughter, she still once again traveled this way and visited the children's home and in the orphanage where Lily grew up. She went there with pictures of the girl. And now, when it was no longer about the interests of a minor girl, the educators were more cooperative. It turned out that this is the same little girl, which parents abandoned immediately after her birth. The situation was finally clarified by a DNA test. Lilia was recovering quickly. The bruises her ex-husband had left on her memory came together. In the hospital, they removed the plaster from her broken arm. The girl enjoyed gardening, planting flowers, caring for plants, noticing how the small garden was transformed under her hands. Neighbors began to ask her for help. Lily believed that even here, in a foreign city, she would be able to do what she loved and get back on her feet. Herbert finally picked up her trail and appeared in the city. But Max, using his old police connections, managed to get a hold of him. "If I ever see you near your sister again, I'll have Sasha for a long time," he promised. "You weren't shy about raising your hand to Lily, and we're not shy. You'll probably be found in possession of drugs. And that's a lot of time." And Mom got a call from the doctor she was hopelessly in love with. Kelly said, "Let's meet you somewhere. I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time." Kelly couldn't invite him to her tiny room. There was no place to sit. They set up a meeting at a cafe in the park near Kelly's house. It was a rainy and cold day, and it suited the woman's mood. Until now, her rare encounters with Ethan had been like a drug of happiness and hope at first. And then he'd be gone for months, if not years. And that was how it was now. The last time they'd seen each other was several years ago. Kelly knew she had grown old, but she accepted her age with dignity. Didn't get along unnecessarily, which made quite a few older women ridiculous. Kelly always dressed tastefully. She didn't own many things, but they all suited her. A good haircut, a light scarf around her neck, a light-colored coat. But most importantly, her gaze had changed. It didn't have that tragic note that you always have. "Something good?" Ethan asked. Kelly smiled slightly. "It's a long story, but you called me here for a reason, so there was a reason." "Let's start with you. I just wanted to see you." Ethan shrugged. "Somehow I ended up alone." "But you've been alone before." Kelly wondered. "As far as I know, your parents live in another city with your brother." That's right. But I guess when you're young, you don't feel loneliness too much. On the contrary, you even want to be at work all day. Everyone needs you there. In the evening, you think about one thing: to come and collapse in bed, and no one to disturb you until morning. But time goes by and things change. I'm almost out of surgery now. Hospital entry is as bad as conspiracy in the royal household. And my eyesight is failing. It's time for eye surgery, so that's the end of my youthful enthusiasm. Now I come home after a day's work like everyone else. And there are nights when I don't feel like going home. I know I'll be greeted by dark apartment windows. I've had a lot of patients, but you're the only one who's ever asked me about me. Everyone else was only interested in me as a doctor. They started telling me about their illnesses, complaining, asking for advice, asking for things. And now I think that no one ever needed me as a person. Ethan stared straight ahead. Kelly was silent. It was no use telling him that she'd loved him for years, unrequitedly. And he hadn't noticed. Would it make any difference now? And you, he continued, tell me about yourself. Before your eyes were always sad. Now they're bright. Something good has happened. It's a story that sounds like a fairy tale. And Kelly told him what she'd never told him before, how she'd lost her daughter, and now she found her again. And she didn't care what her old friend thought of her now. Ethan was shaken. I can imagine the burden she'd lived with for so many years. How's Lily doing now? She's fine. If you need my help. No, she's almost recovered, and now she wants to get back on her feet. I signed the house over to her, and she's making a real piece of paradise out of it. She knows that I would do anything for her, that I'm deeply remorseful and guilty. But I have to give her time, and for now I'm not imposing. She has to see for herself if she can accept me as her mother. You are a wise man. Ethan touched Kelly's arm, and you can forgive me. And she returned the chin. For what? Well, I'm a complete fool. I've noticed things. But at the time, I valued my freedom more than anything. And now I'd like to make up for it, if it's not too late. 2 months later, Kelly and Ethan's modest wedding was celebrated at the old country house. There was a wonderful starfall that night, and everyone could make a wish and believe it would come true.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Mom didn't cry, didn't get hysterical or numb, didn't start cursing men or touchingly pitying her daughter. In general, she behaved in her usual manner. Sitting down, across the table, she reached across the table and stroked Cindy's palm. It was for the best that Cindy saw his true face now and not later. The kind of guy that would leave sooner or later anyway, even at the worst moments in life. If it wasn't for Nancy, it would have been for someone else. Be glad you won't have to regret the lost time and effort. Let's make your favorite lemon cookies for ourselves. Mom, are you kidding me? What cookies? I can't breathe. Cindy sobbed, and Mommy just let her sob, looking on with understanding and involvement. Patiently waiting for the tears to stop, she brought a glass of water and said, putting her arm around her shoulders, it actually helps a lot in these cases to do something familiar and ordinary. Except for nasty chores like cleaning and washing dishes, of course. My mom hated both, although she loved to cook and could create a culinary miracle from the simplest and cheapest products. I hate doing the dishes and making things clean. Without any caprice, sincerely informed her fans, and frightened fans of free coziness quickly dissolved in space. Cindy didn't work out like Mom. She doesn't know how to stand up for herself. So they take everything away from her. So Robert was taken away. That's what she should do. 6 months ago, Cindy had a happy accident. She was in the right place at the right time, and her humble life changed miraculously. She had just graduated from teacher's college and came to work in a kindergarten. Many old acquaintances were surprised by Cindy's unfashionable choices. At school, she studied well, without much effort, and could have chosen a more prestigious and profitable specialty. Only Nancy's mother, grandmother and friend were not surprised. They were aware that Cindy loved babies, and babies adored her since Cindy had managed to grow out of baby age herself. It was so, and the calling was pointless to resist. Of course, she will not stop at college, will combine profile studies with work. Cindy was given a junior group of 15 3-year-olds, 10 of them boys, and half of them hyperactive. There's no need to be bored. The whole shift is a roller coaster. Her magical ability to calm children will definitely come in handy here. The 5 little girls in this group are amusingly different. 2 little girls, 2 princesses, and a shy, brooding Jenna. On a walk, some slide off the roof of the children's slide like monkeys, others twirl prominently in pretty dresses, and Jenna gazes at flowers, bugs, and butterflies, trying to remain almost invisible herself. This girl was neither stuffy nor intimidated. She was just cozy enough to ponder alone. After watching her teacher for a couple of days, Jenna decided that she could trust her, and when she felt it necessary, she showed her findings or was the first to bring her drawings. She really loved to draw. Cindy couldn't help herself. Jenna was the one she was most attached to and loved. It was usually Mama who came to get Jenna. She was a small, graceful blonde, a little older than her teacher, gentle, polite, not very talkative. She seemed like an enlarged copy of her little daughter. She raised the child alone. She often looked sad and tired, according to the headmistress. The 3 of them lived together, Jenna, her mother, and her grandmother. But the grandmother had not yet been seen in the kindergarten. The gossip at the daycare center was that she had been against the birth of Cindy's favorite, had persuaded her daughter to have an abortion, and was now fundamentally unhelpful in raising the baby girl. Cindy has become even more infiltrated with the girl. She herself grew up without a father, but in the love and care of her mother and grandmother, never once all her childhood did not doubt. Cindy could have grown up mistrustful and wary, but was prevented by her mother's easygoing nature. Mom was convinced that most people weren't bad. It's just that everyone is very different. Hence the misunderstandings between them. It was Cindy's 3rd month at the daycare center, when instead of Mama Clara came to pick up Jenna, a sturdy, charming brown-haired man of about 25, energetic hand, with gray-blue eyes and a bright, self-assured smile. It seemed to Cindy that he realized he had made an impression on the young educator, and it was even hurtful. Had Jenna's father remembered her? She thought, and in an instant she understood Jenna, Mom, and out loud she said, "I can't give my child to a stranger. It's for the safety of the children entrusted to us." Jenna's mom had no warning that someone else was coming for her. No question about it. Her stranger replied magnanimously, pulled out his cell phone, made a call, and said into the receiver, "Clara, here is the most beautiful Mary Poppins. To me Jenna does not give. Talk to her in your own voice, that I am not a stranger." And I gave the phone to Cindy. Jenna's mom voice came through. "Excuse me, I forgot to warn you yesterday. My brother arrived and asked Jenna to pick him up so I wouldn't have to run like a fugitive from work." Cindy knew that Clara, the accountant, had a strict boss who would rather stay late at work than leave early. Sometimes all the children are already taken away, and Cindy and Jenna are still walking alone on the playground, waiting for their mom. It's good that Clara will have a little rest, and Jenna will not be offended that she is the last to be picked up. And for some reason, it is very unpleasant that the young man is not Jenna's dad. Though that doesn't mean he doesn't have children of his own. And anyway, why should she be interested in that? "Thanks for your vigilance, Cindy," declared the guy with mocking seriousness. "You can be trusted. Come and see Uncle Jenna. Let's go home." At the exit, he turned around with the girl in his arms, And my name is Uncle Charles. Goodbye, Uncle Charles." With a reserved smile, Cindy said goodbye and forced herself to immediately turn around and walk from the locker room to the group. Don't let him think he impressed her. She sees uncles like that every day. It's so commonplace, and it's a Hollywood smile, like an ad man or a salesman. Anyway, it didn't work out for Cindy. She kept thinking about Jenna's uncle all evening. And tomorrow he came for his niece again. The usually cautious, reserved Jenna ran toward him, spreading her arms. "Uncle, pardon me for asking, is everything all right with Claire?" Cindy dared to ask. "Everything's fine," Uncle Charles assured her. "I just thought I'd relieve my little sister while I'm here. At least let her get away from the daily evening rush to daycare. My contract's up, so I'm just visiting family for a vacation. I don't know how much yet." "I don't know how much." He was probably waiting for Cindy to ask him something. What he did for a living where he worked. But Cindy just nodded and said, "Okay, I see," and immediately felt how stupid and boring it sounded. "Oh, I almost forgot," slapped himself lightly on the forehead of the guy. "This is for you," and held out a box of expensive candy. Cindy and her mom used to get them on holidays. "Thank you." Cindy was surprised. "What's the gift for?" "In honor of our acquaintance." The boy smiled. The next day he brought roses, 5 big cherry roses. Jenna jumped, satisfied with the gift of her favorite educator. Without having time to find the right words, the uncle picked up his niece, promised, "See you tomorrow," and went out the door of the group. Cindy, after a little thought, took the flowers home and told her mother about the new acquaintance. "At least he's not a greedy bastard." Mom laughed carelessly, admiring the bouquet. "The flowers are gorgeous. Now so many men do not give flowers, even funny to say, consider a woman mercantile for the desire to get a bouquet or drink a cup of coffee in a beautiful coffee shop. They make the stupidest conclusions. Yes, I will always support a man in difficult moments. Do not reproach, share all the hardships, but I do not intend to do it for a known bogeyman. One good thing, you can see them right away." "Oh," I got distracted. Mom loved a lyrical digression, as she called it. She didn't share the details of her personal life with Cindy, but she enjoyed thinking out loud, so you could more or less understand what she was going through. Mom had a happy streak. She was always interested in life, even if life was not very smooth. Most likely, it was because of this that she looked younger than her years and all her classmates. Despite her modest income, she did not hover in the clouds, but just a little soaring above the asphalt and lawns. "Do you look surprised and confused?" she asked Cindy. "Why should I be? It's just business as usual. A young man has decided to court you classically. That's not a bad thing, as long as he's not married. I don't advise you to get involved with married men." "You're so pretty, Cindy. Girls have been guessing since they were kids, and you're like a hesitant, modest girl. Just a piece of antique window dressing. A modest beauty." Mom always managed to make me feel confident that everything was going to be all right. The next day, Charles came for Jenna again and took out from the inside pocket of his jacket 2 rectangles of theater tickets. "Let's go to the theater on Saturday, shall we? I mean, really, I just want to ask if Cindy would be willing to go out with me." "We could try," Cindy said, "and we have a really good theater." On Saturday evening, Nancy dropped by, caught Cindy packing, and rounded her eyes with amusement. "Wow, you're putting on a dress. Something unusual has happened, and your best friend doesn't know." The mom who heard this snickered and disappeared somewhere. Cindy was a little confused. Her friend guessed the events even on an empty place, and here was such a material proof. Cindy was a stay-at-home mom, could on ready-made patterns or on orders, coordinated to the smallest detail, could with the connection of his own imagination, when the client himself does not know what he wants. Clients were very different. They paid not only with money, but also with primitive natural exchange, as my mother called it. One girl sewing a business pantsuit partially paid with a piece of artificial tie silk. Mom had not been warned of this turn of events. She was counting on the full amount in cash. She and Cindy were just having another dieting spree. That was Mom's expression, too. It's what she called a period of no money. But the girls' times were the same, and she hoped to get out of them by going to the interview, sewing Cindy's mom's suit, and getting her dream job. Informal pay, but it would do. Mom agreed, stroking a narrow section of smooth, navy-colored fabric. And in 2 days, she sewed the girl an elegant tweed suit, and the daughter a simple, elegant dress. Coco Chanel had a little black one and Cindy will have a little turquoise one, she announced. It looks good on redheads. Mom, it's a masterpiece. Cindy exhaled sincerely, turning around twice in front of the mirror. But now I have to figure out where to wear it so as not to offend him. Oh, if only there was a dress, and the occasion will be found, Mom assured me. Nancy tried to borrow the dress once. She was counting on it, but it was made to Cindy's exact measurements. Nancy, I'll be sure to sew something to fit your tantalizing thighs. Cindy was comforted by her mother, and the dress was waiting on the shoulders in the closet faithful, the only mistress. Now Nancy examined Cindy and made a quick judgment. I'll assume you just haven't had time to tell me what's new with you. But now you're just not going to get away with it. Nothing much has happened, or you'd be the first to know. Cindy assured me, and it was true. Cindy and Nancy had been friends since kindergarten. Ever since Nancy's parents had come to town and put their daughter in preschool. No one could explain why such different girls had become such good friends. But they hadn't even quarreled once. Somehow there was no reason. Self-loving Nancy, named so in honor of her grandmother, suited her very well, this rare name. There was something icy about it. If their school had been casting for the role of the Snow Queen, Nancy would have been chosen. No one could blame her for anything. She didn't get mad at anyone. She didn't fight with anyone. She didn't gossip about anyone. Nancy was not perfect. She simply had little interest in other people. For a select few, she made an exception. Among them was her childhood friend Cindy. Nancy's mother was very pleased with their friendship. In her opinion, when Charles called, Cindy was long since ready. They were sitting in the kitchen. Mom and Nancy were drinking coffee and chocolate chip cookies, and Cindy was just waiting and trying to appear casual. I'll be right out, she promised into her phone and looked out the 4th floor window into the street, followed by Nancy. Charles parked in the driveway, got out of the car, looked up. An Audi. Nancy said, I wonder if it was a credit car. Everything was going great, as Mom would classically define it. After several years of working in the North, Charles had planned a vacation at his folks' place 2 months. Then he had Bern in his plans, especially since it wasn't far away. He had already bought a studio on the outskirts 2 years ago and had been renting it out all this time. Now he would ask the tenants to vacate the apartment for the landlord, live and look for a job in Bern. Toward the end of his 2nd month in his hometown, Charles made one more item in his plans. One Saturday evening, he unexpectedly came to visit with a bouquet and a cake, met his mother, and immediately announced, Evelyn, I have serious intentions. I want to marry Cindy. I'll be honest with you, we'll have to wait. I have to find a job in Bern that will provide for my family. I'm used to good wages in the north, but it's harder to find that kind of work in civilization. If I can't find one, I'll go back on shift. I need a bigger apartment for my family instead of a studio. You're a sensible man, Charles. That's not a bad thing. But I'm guessing this is the first time Cindy's heard of your plans together. That was the plain truth. Cindy was caught off guard, and she was no good at pretending. In those 2 months, she had fallen so self-consciously in love that everything else in her life had taken a back seat, seemed unimportant. She felt so good that she was afraid to think about the future, so as not to jinx it with her plans. She had never been superstitious before, but now she was. She dared to look, only very far away. Robert was going to Bern. They would call each other. He would come for the weekend as promised. She would wait and rush the weekend. For how long? She tried not to think. I wanted to talk to you and Cindy at once. Cindy, will you be my official bride? I will, Cindy said. She had imagined it differently, but she was still very happy. She wanted to hug Robert, but was shy in front of her mother. He was sitting solemn too, like a headmaster at a banquet. I'll bring the ring from Bern. There's no good jewelry shop here. I'm sorry it was so awkward. We realize not everything can be calculated and planned. Cindy's mom calmed him down. A spontaneous decision isn't always worse than a well-considered one. Am I lucky to have a mother-in-law? Charles exclaimed. With a mother-in-law you are. Mom assured him. And I'm all for total non-interference. Yes, Mom is, confirmed Cindy. Even her voice seemed unfamiliar to her. It was more melodious today, because everything was singing inside. Charles could have gone to Bern without this offer. She had not expected anything like this from him. It wouldn't even occur to her to take offense that he wouldn't promise anything. It turns out he really cares for her. He wants her to know that he is serious on his part and to wait for him. Being a bride makes the waiting different. It makes it so much easier for her to wait, and the next week just before Robert left, it was her birthday. Charles had booked a banquet at a cafe for Cindy's closest loved ones. At their side were her mom and Nancy. The groom came with his mom and sister and Jenna. Cindy, you weren't prepared to meet your future mother-in-law on your birthday, were you? Nancy whispered to her. Actually, I was, Cindy admitted. But if Charles wants it that way, I don't mind. By the way, it's your birthday. Nancy reminded her. Jenna almost stayed in Cindy's arms. It was the first time she had ever been to a banquet, even a small one. All her celebrations had been at home and at daycare. She looked with interest at the decorated table and the beautifully folded napkins. Cindy Mom found an approach to Robert's silent mom, and they talked about fabrics. Mom was generally good with all kinds of people, but she liked her privacy best. Clara, Robert's sister, looked tired, but she tried to seem cheerful and lively. Like she should at a birthday party, she praised Cindy in front of her mom. Does she really like me, and is she so nice? Cindy thought gratefully. Nancy walked from table to bar to chat with the bartender, a Chinese man who had been brought to their town and to this bar by some unknown wind. She would gracefully sit down on a stool, showing off her beautiful legs, and the bartender should have been grateful to her. Visitors from the neighboring room began to pull up to the bar, obviously because of the white-haired, unruffled beauty. You and your friend look nothing alike. Robert's mother, who was watching Nancy, told Cindy. Of course, we're not sisters. Cindy laughed. She would have liked to spend the evening alone with Charles, but it was all right. Jenna is interested, though. She'll probably spend a few days drawing everything she's memorized. Charles gave Cindy a new cell phone for her birthday, and 2 days later he left for Bern. And the usual routine began. Cindy tried her best to get away from work, to switch. She even tried once again to learn sewing from her mother. "Do you miss her that much?" Mom asked understandingly. "Yes," Cindy admitted. "I didn't even expect myself. I thought that such feelings were invented for novels to make them more interesting for women to read. I was sure I'd live in peace. Look how confident she was, not with your jeans." Mom smiled. "In consolation, I can say that I had strong feelings, and I do not regret it at all, and I am very glad." Charles came every week at first, then became every other weekend. Cindy knew it was hard to spend 12 o'clock on the road after a work week and then drive back a day later. Sometimes you just need to sleep at home and not be disturbed. Charles invited Cindy to his house for New Year's Eve and to show her around Bern. Sometimes you need a change of scenery. Cindy was careful to tell her mother. What would she say to that? "Cindy, you really are an antique. Do you think I'm going to talk you out of it?" "No, of course not. We're not in Victorian England, and you're not a schoolgirl. You're a grown-up, independent girl. It's bound to happen at some point. I'm glad for you that it's not too soon and as it happens, but for love. It's important, believe me." Cindy believed her mother. She was sure, without any proof, that her mother understood love. "Who are you going to spend Christmas with, Grandma?" Once upon a time they lived in this little apartment. The 4 of them, Grandma, Grandpa, and Mom and Cindy. Cindy didn't remember Grandpa very well. He had died early, and Grandma had lived with them for a long time. 2 years ago, she had come from the market and told her from the doorstep that she had met an elderly gentleman there who had selflessly helped her carry potatoes and other miscellaneous root vegetables home. She wouldn't have bought so many if the gentleman hadn't come along. She decided to take a chance. Grandma's acquaintance turned out to be a resident of a neighboring town. He had a house in the private sector, where he lived alone. His children lived and worked in Bern and rarely came to visit. His wife had died a few years ago. Christopher had come here for a friend's anniversary, and now he promised to visit more often. Grandma said flirtatiously. Cindy and her mom laughed and forgot about it the next day. Christopher wasn't kidding. He came to see Grandma, and one day she asked her girls for permission to bring him to visit. But Christopher and I aren't students to wander the streets or go to restaurants. He tries to take me out for tea and cakes somewhere. But you can't sit for hours in a supermarket, and we're not interested in the movies. We want to socialize. Of course, Mom and Cindy invited Christopher. He turned out to be a nice man. This ex-physics teacher, a man of rare manhood. He introduced himself with a chuckle. He no longer taught at school, but ran a technical club for children at the local cultural center. It was obvious that he adored his grandmother. He didn't show it on purpose or hide it. Cindy thought it was a little funny at the time, but her mother said she was just a young girl. 6 months later, Grandma and Christopher decided to move in together. Cindy and her mom were invited to visit at Christopher's house, so that they could have peace of mind that Grandma would be living in decent conditions. The house really turned out to be good and even well maintained. Christopher could do everything himself, including women's work. Mom said that she was calm for Grandmother, giving her into safe hands. To Grandmother and Christopher will still have time. Mom answered Cindy's question. And at Christmas, I was also invited to the dacha by a good friend. To be honest, I just wouldn't go if you stayed at home. I would prefer your company. And this way I'll have a romantic Christmas too, maybe. So thank you, daughter. Have a good time in Bern. Cindy and her mother laughed together. She has a wonderful mom after all. Nancy is jealous. You can't talk to her mom like that. You have to choose your words. You can't say the wrong thing. You have to be decent at all times. You have to live by the rules, even the rules your mom doesn't follow. You know what she likes to say? When you're my age, you can do whatever you want. A young girl should behave herself. Where did she get that nonsense from? Nobody thinks like that anymore, only her. Your mom cares what you think and feel. Mine cares that no one can say anything bad about me. That's how we live. I can understand if I was to be married to a millionaire or a sultan. Sultans are millionaires too. Cindy put it in. Uh-huh, continued Nancy, who was not easily thrown off course. So I say there's no point in looking to public opinion. Nobody really thinks about us. Talk for 2 minutes and forget it. Everyone's busy living their own lives, and yeah, I'm still in the habit of acting the way I used to. Although I'm not under any illusions about meeting a millionaire. Ethan, the hardware store owner, is probably my ceiling. Cindy made no secret of her sympathy for poor Ethan. He'd been a devoted admirer of her friend for almost 4 years. Ever since he'd seen Nancy in a scarlet floor-length dress walking with Cindy from the prom. But while to someone like Cindy's grandmother, Ethan was a decent, serious guy and even a successful businessman, to Nancy he was plain, boring, and rude. But he didn't realize it, because although she argued with her mother, she behaved as she should and didn't get outspoken. Cindy went to Bern for Christmas, and she had never had a happier Christmas, not even as a child, when everything is magical at Christmas time. In the afternoon, Charles would show her around the capital. In the evening, they would go back to his little studio and be alone. Charles said he hadn't made any friends here yet. He only worked, and on weekends, he either went to Cindy's hometown or just slept and watched TV series if he was too tired. Cindy would wake up in the middle of the night and make a wish. They would have friends in Bern when they lived together. They would have a very cozy life, and it would be nice to visit them. Cindy helped to choose presents for Robert's mother and sister, and for Jenna, and she also had to drive them. She was a little surprised that Charles didn't want to go to the family by himself. We could spend half the vacation in Bern and half at home. Cindy, I'm exactly at home here. What's there to do there? Where would you and I meet like this? I don't think we'd be able to spend so many nights together. Ma and I aren't exactly close, if you've noticed. I love her, sure, but we don't have much to talk about. Clara likes to whine. She gave birth to Jenna, no one forced her to, and now it's like it's someone else's fault she's having a hard time. Of course I feel sorry for her, but feeling sorry makes you tired. You're just tired. Cindy hastened to justify him. She would find something to say to his mom, Miranda. Think of something to make them feel good. Everyone gets tired sometimes, even those closest to them. True, Cindy couldn't remember her and her grandmother or her mother ever getting so tired of each other, but men must be different. Sometimes you have to leave them alone so they have time to miss each other. She knows too little about it yet. I wonder how Mom is doing. When she wished them a Merry Christmas, her voice was carefree and happy. Cindy sometimes felt that Mama was the same age as she was. The Christmas holidays had passed. The usual dark routine had returned. The calendar hinted at spring, but it didn't look like spring. Charles visited Cindy and his family less and less often, after 2 weeks or even 3. Cindy understood, or seemed to understand, but she was restless, anxious. The winds rattled the windows at night, and it seemed to sleepless Cindy that it was bad news knocking at the house, which was hidden from her during the day. Weekends without Robert seemed long and useless. Nancy had somehow become a little distant. She had her own things to do. She had even stopped demanding details of Cindy's personal life. Cindy imperceptibly became friends with Clara, Robert's sister. Clara came to visit with Jenna. The girls drank strong tea with a spoonful of homemade herbal balm, a gift from Grandma Christopher, and her mother read Jenna a book or played with her. It was a little funny and very unfamiliar to have someone address Mommy as Baba Evelyn. But it didn't make the mom herself sad at all. Baba is the child's degree of trust. You silly girls, the girls weren't so stupid. They realized that Cindy was pleased that Clara and Jenna were frequenting their house. It was like Charles was getting so close, and Charles said at every call, "Thank you for your consideration for my girls, Cindy." Mama always admonished them to come by more often, and Robert's mom was slow to invite them over. She's that kind of person. Cindy was reassured by her own mom, and by the way, it's even better. Most likely, she is not interested and does not need to know everything about you. Watching you, controlling you, snooping around, it'll be easier for you if you ever get married. Mom said that in the kindest of ways, without innuendo or double meanings. But Cindy still didn't like it, if ever. Nor was anything else unequivocal, after their promises and arrangements, and all the wonderful things between them. In the spring, when the morning was still cold to gloveless hands, but the parks were already filled with pale green smoke from buds barely bursting on the trees, Cindy had been sent to Bern for a conference. A face-to-face conference for child care providers and educators. Probably some of the family child care providers would have liked a change of scenery and a trip to Bern. But the superintendent sent the free Cindy, who was very sympathetic. Young responsible specialist for all the time of work without conflict with the parents of the pupils. Just the fiancé in Bern, they will see each other. Cindy decided to go without a surprise call. They had not seen each other for more than 2 weeks. An unexpected meeting will make her even happier. "Clara, please don't tell your brother I'm coming. I want to show up out of the blue, surprise him." Clara was silent for a moment, hesitating. And then she asked, "Are you sure, Cindy? Shouldn't we give him a little warning? Do you think your brother would be angry if he saw me? He says he misses me all the time. I don't ask him to." "You're right, don't mind him. As my mom likes to say, I'm just very sensitive." The conference started on Monday, and Cindy arrived in Bern on Sunday evening. She took a cab from the subway to Robert's house. She had so many homemade pies and pickles with her. She wanted to catch her breath a little from the road and to look pretty to Charles, not tired. Cindy paid the driver and got out of the cab at the corner of the house. There were roadworks further along, patches on the pavement, and it was a bit of a walk. A couple was saying goodbye at Robert's front door. A shapely girl in a light, unseasonable mini dress and a half coat thrown over her shoulders, with white thick hair down to her shoulders, was kissing a young man on the lips, who lightly embraced her below the waist. She broke the kiss, but continued to stare at her companion. It was Charles, slightly wrinkled and pleased with himself. "Should I say hello to your country girl for you?" Cindy heard a familiar voice, playfully melodic, almost flawless. What is she doing here? Nancy laughed softly, turned away from Robert, and faced Cindy. "There you go, one leaves and one comes in." She wasn't confused, but she didn't wait for an answer. Nancy was leaving in no particular hurry, in her usual gait, what Cindy's mother used to call a catwalk walk. She had known her friend too long and well. She was convinced that Cindy would not run after her, could not bring herself to move. Cindy's travel bags were frozen in her hands, and she had to at least put them on the pavement to lose all their weight, and her fingers wouldn't stretch, wouldn't obey. Charles, as if nothing had happened, took hold of the handles of the bags and pulled them toward him. "Let's take them and go home." Cindy obediently followed him as if in a fog. In the elevator, she stood looking at her feet, or in the corner, unable to look up at Robert, as if she were afraid of seeing someone else entirely. In the apartment, she sat down on the edge of a chair on the corner of the table, her back to the disassembled sofa. "Bunny, I didn't think you were such a child as your charges in the younger group." Charles addressed her condescendingly. "It's not like you and me, pure physiology. We don't see each other much. I'm a healthy man, and I have needs. I was sure you would realize that and not come without warning so as not to embarrass me and yourself. I would never have let you run into each other here if I had known. I'm not afraid of you coming without warning any time." Cindy replied, "Zai, that's why I'm marrying you. You have all the qualities of a good wife. This is your pseudo-girlfriend, with pleasure spend time, but only idiots marry them. Yeah, you're not an idiot. You want a country girl at home who's easy to fool. Zai, don't mess with my head. It doesn't suit you. People like her just want to assert themselves at the expense of others, at least to make a mean comment to someone more fortunate. And you fell for it like a little girl." "Yeah, she gets leftovers, and she convinces herself that she's beaten someone." Cindy listened to him. She dares to look up. He doesn't think he's wrong. He sees himself as a gift, a prize being fought over. I guess it's good to be like that, as long as there are fools like Cindy. She stood up and picked up a smaller bag from the floor. "Here's your other one with the pies in it, and the winter cooking." Charles, with a conciliatory smile, blocked her path by the front door. "Don't be silly, Cindy. Where are you going for the night?" "To a hotel. I have a departmental reservation. I'm here for a conference, not to catch you red-handed." "Wow, we're so strict. Are we rehearsing an insulted wife?" "Let me through." "Yes, come in, of course. I'm a beast. When you cool down, call me where you're staying and when we're free. Let's go out after my work and your conference." He was smiling in a friendly way. It was funny, he didn't even think to hide it, or at least play remorseful. Cindy didn't even have tears. It was like a stone had been placed on her chest. She decided not to call her mom. She wouldn't help anyway. She'd just get upset. She'd think a lot, think in silence, and so order slower. At 7:00 p.m. the next day, when she had just returned to her room, Charles called. Cindy had agreed with herself yesterday that she would not answer the phone, but she broke her promise. People change, realize things, even overnight. You can't rule out that slim little chance. Charles suggested businesslike when she gave him the address where to pick you up. He didn't doubt it at all. She realized wryly. People don't change, you just get to know them better over time. But maybe he was just pretending to be so cynical. If he didn't care about Cindy, he wouldn't be calling now. He'd be taking the opportunity to get rid of his annoying friend easily. Why all those emails and postcards? The calls, the gifts, the introductions to families. He loved her, she couldn't be wrong. She wasn't some posh, unapproachable socialite to win her over out of ego. So he does love her. She just didn't know how to express it the way Cindy wanted to. She gave the address. Charles arrived, quickly, brought a bouquet of white lilies, suggested they go to the premiere of a comedy. He was the same as he'd always been, joking confidently, opening the door with a warning. Cindy wondered if he was pretending, or if he really didn't see that she seemed frozen or petrified now. He was chuckling quietly at the movie, enjoying the evening. And Cindy didn't care much at all about what was happening on the screen around her. "Shall we go home?" he suggested lazily after the movie. "Let's order delivery for dinner, a bottle of wine." Cindy was silent, remembered the Nancy front room, the disassembled bed. I can't go there yet. You know, this hurts me, and you don't even apologize, even though it's so easy. Just because I love you doesn't mean you can do this to me. Here we go, Charles said curtly, wrinkling his nose. Everything was fine, and now it's back to this kindergarten stuff. Really, your element is kindergarten. You're in the right profession. He turned and strode leisurely to the car. Cindy could hardly restrain herself from rushing after him. She was afraid. Even his back showed that he might be gone for good, and she could do nothing about it. She can't hold him back, make him regret what he's done and apologize. She can't do anything. She's a hen. She's a hen. She's a pussycat. She's a hen. Nancy's right. The third day of the conference was over. Cindy was going home. Charles still hadn't called. It's a good thing that Mom and Clara, not to disturb her and at the wrong time, didn't call her, but messaged her. It's easier to reply there that everything is fine. The voice in the text is not audible. Before the train, Cindy stopped to buy a small gift for Jenna and went to the train station. Just as she was settling down on a side shelf and the platform slowly floated past, the bell rang. Charles. I ran to the vestibule, tripping over other people's legs, stretched out into the aisle, as if I couldn't answer it in the car. I thought it would be better to speak to you directly, so that there would be no misunderstandings, so that you wouldn't make up things for yourself. Robert's voice sounded soft and almost indifferent. For some reason, Cindy remembered a Methodist at a conference, tired from the presentation and the buffet. You and I shouldn't continue our relationship. I was wrong, I admit it. We're not right for each other. You're over-dramatizing life, and you can get tired of it quickly. We'd both get bored, and if I'm feeling it now, you know there's no point. You can keep the presents, be happy. Say hi to my family, I'll come by sometime. He said that text and dropped the call. That's what it's called, dropping the call. That Mom's quietly sad expression. Cindy knew it well. Mom, you knew this would happen, and you didn't say anything to me, not once. I'm like an old crow that just wants to caw. I didn't like Charles very much, but my opinion is just my opinion. I'm entitled to be wrong, and it's not that uncommon for me to be wrong. Why would I want to ruin the best parts of my life? There were good things, weren't there? There was. Cindy exhaled. Well then, it's all good. And there's nothing to regret? There was and there will be. Not with him. Do all men look at it that way? Why would I even want to be in a relationship? Come on, don't generalize. They're as different as we are. It's true that fidelity isn't for everyone. Things happen in life. I haven't judged anyone in a long time. But a good, decent man behaves differently. If his girlfriend, especially his fiancée, caught him with someone else. Of course, when he loves someone, even if he doesn't love her anymore, he still behaves differently. And you realize it yourself. Sometimes a guy is an incorrigible womanizer, but he's a good person. In Robert's case, it's not the cheating that matters, it's how he behaved afterwards. You got rid of such a piece of dung daughter. It's worth celebrating. I lost my friends too, Mom. Nancy and I have never had a serious quarrel since we were kids. We trusted each other, and now, even if I wanted to, I couldn't even trust her in the smallest things. It wasn't an accident that she came to Bern to see him. It's deliberate. And Clara herself won't want to keep in touch with me after her brother and I broke up. Nancy wasn't a friend, she was just a traveling companion. People like that are friends when it suits them. If it's not favorable, they'll kick you in the head with their boots and move on. No one to regret either. Clara is not a stupid girl, though her mother and brother think otherwise. She'll figure out who she wants to hang out with. If she distances herself from you, it's because she's embarrassed about her brother. It happens to people with a conscience. Someone else did something bad, and you're embarrassed. When do you have to go to work? Mom could jump from one topic to another in a heartbeat. Cindy was used to it, but sometimes she couldn't keep up with Mom's thinking. Monday, today's my arrival day, and tomorrow is my day off after the conference. Going out of town for a weekend of sadness. Or if I'm lucky, not even sad. The friend I spent Christmas with has a cottage in a magical place, almost in the middle of the woods. There are snowdrops in the sunny spots. Mom, you've never introduced me to your friends. Is there something serious here? Just a man I'd love you to meet. His name is No. It's both serious and not serious, a little bit of everything. Anyway, I'm welcome to visit with my daughter, my mom or Christopher. There's a dog and 2 ginger cats. Oranges, tangerines. Let's go. Charles was going on vacation. It was the first time he'd ever been so lucky. He was going on vacation alone without his wife. His wife, having received an invitation to a friend's wedding in Spain, got excited, packed up and flew away, picking up the speed of the Boeing from the very threshold. Not even for the sake of decency do not offer your husband to keep you company. He asked. Nope. The wife shook her head. There will be ours, our yoga course. You are not interested, and I deserve a vacation and complete relaxation. And I want to see a real Spanish wedding, Spanish mother-in-law, and other highlights. And you can go somewhere to make up for it. Does your dad know you need a vacation? And she flew away happy and contented. It was even annoying that he wasn't jealous anymore. Letting her go on vacation alone, just to have a vacation without her husband. They hadn't been together that long. Charles married the daughter of the technical director of a small company with which he worked as a development engineer. They met at a summer corporate retreat where employees could bring a family member with them if they wished. There was a lot of people. Contests, fireworks, dancing to pops, all sorts of nonsense for the accountant's amusement. A full-figured but bright, confident brunette came up to him as he was bored at the bar on the open veranda. What kind of cocktail would I like? She wasn't exactly Charles's type, but if she showed interest, it was indecent to ignore the chance. Charles ordered another cocktail. We drank and danced. I'm going out for a minute, the girl said after the dance. Stay here, don't leave. While your lady goes to powder her nose, I'll tell you something. The mocking voice of David's colleague sounded behind my shoulder. So you don't get too excited. It's our boss's daughter. The only favorite, spoiled, does not want to work. She studies here and there. She'll sigh, it's not my thing. She'll go and live in Vietnam, go and study something new again. Dad dreams of marrying her off. She'll be 30 soon. For him, that's the age when girls should be worried about not getting married. I'm talking to you because that's not the best butterfly for your herbarium. Charles managed to say a big thank you to David, only mentally. He grinned and disappeared into the crowd of cowworkers, barely noticing that his companion was returning. If Charles had had any interest in Molly, it had diminished with the news of her parentage. It's better to play the right nerdy careerist to make Molly bored and switch to a more interesting object. You can tell she's a gambler. The careerist turned out Charles not badly, even talented in some places. There's a reason he was in good standing with the company. But that damned careerist Molly, too, had taken a fancy to him. She preferred to think of herself as a romantic, but in fact she was determined, strong-willed, and tenacious. Charles, who liked to set the tone in relationships and get the girls talking, felt driven for the first time. Molly had asked for his phone number herself when she left the corporate party with her dad, and she'd called him herself, never doubting that he'd welcome the call. She could call in the middle of the day. We talked about cars, boats. Charles was invited to go fishing in a narrow circle, in which revolved quite closed, serious John. There was a lot to think about. He seemed to be seen as a future son-in-law. His relationship with Molly was a protracted fling. Charles just didn't want to complicate his life for fear of unintended consequences. In the eyes of Molly's parents, he clearly looked like a well-mannered, serious young man with moral principles who needed more than just a bed. It would be very funny if it wasn't happening to him. Charles, a week before the fishing trip, read several thematic sites and bought himself the right equipment and the right spinning rod with which it is not ashamed to appear in a serious fishing community. He enjoyed fishing as a hobby. He was looking for an upside to his position, and that's the first thing that came to mind. Basically, he just wasn't planning on getting married yet. He was quite happy with the advantages of being single, but if he reconsidered his plans, things were looking up. The second such chance for a guy from a small town, from the most ordinary family, may not be. Without the right acquaintances and favorable kinship, he expected only routine work and slow career growth. That is, if in an office with business trips without a shift, and he didn't want to shift anymore. Charles liked comfort. If he was honest with himself, the prospect of marrying Molly, say, the daughter of the head of the security department, suited him just fine. Gray, with a heavy chin and the look of a school vice principal, would be a really dull option. Molly is bright, draws male attention to herself, and on the whole, she is a good-natured, cheerful girl. If you don't look at the little things, Charles was well aware of what embarrassed him the most. He couldn't stand feminists and seriously believed that most of women's woes are from their influence. He makes the money and dictates the rules. He envisioned his wife as a pretty, gentle girl who owed him a lot and recognized his dominance. He'd had one once, almost 3 years ago in his hometown. It seems it was in another life. Cindy's kindergarten teacher, cozy knave. He actually almost married her, thought she was just right. If I'd gotten my hands on her girlfriend, who was playing hard to get, the hunter's appetite kicked in, and his girl was in the wrong place at the wrong time and saw them. And she walked around with such a reproach in her eyes and seriously waited for repentance, though she had looked him in the mouth before. Charles saw the devil in a quiet pool and changed his mind about getting married. He had achieved everything on his own, not to have his standards imposed on him. Now here we go. He was definitely not going to live by his own rules. Charles hadn't decided overnight Friday and Saturday what line of behavior to take at the informal meeting. John, his 2 friends, and his cousin greeted Charles cordially and did not show their superiority. Late in the evening, when the company drank and dined in a cozy shooting cottage, Evgenievich called Charles to the terrace and asked directly to you seriously with Molly. Just honestly explain like a man to a man. I'll understand. I love your daughter. John stated, Charles, whatever happens, and what's the holdup? She's waiting. It's just a fashion for girls to be independent these days. In fact, they're waiting for a man to take the initiative. You know that without me? I'm not a boy anymore. I realize I can't give her the standard of living she's used to. Caught the Charles part. I'm afraid I'm falling short. I don't want to look like a slick, provincial Alfonso. It's not for me. I realize Molly deserves someone more successful. Look how proud we are. Okay, I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it. Now I'll tell you. My daughter has my character. It doesn't matter to us that you're not status. It's all gonna come if you want it to. And you have it. I can see that, and I'm gonna help you. I care about my daughter's happiness, not what anyone thinks. I don't work for myself like Papa Carlo. When you have kids of your own, you'll understand. Molly never wanted to get married. She's never wanted to get married, but she wants to marry you. So don't hesitate and don't procrastinate. Propose. My mother and I will organize any wedding you want. You can have 300 people, or just the two of you in the Maldives. Thank you for your understanding, John. Just as long as it works out. That's how Charles got married. Molly didn't want a crowded wedding. She wanted a modest ceremony and a romantic exotic cruise. Weddings are only for drunken guests and hackneyed plots, she said. Charles was grateful to her. First of all, he was bored by crowded gatherings. Second, he realized that his mother and Clara would look out of place against Molly's friends and peers, who were groomed and carefree. Poor, simple relatives of a provincial Alfonso. And no lavish wedding, there is no demonstration of their kin. Charles called home and announced that he was getting married. They would go on a wedding trip, and then they would stop by sometime to visit with gifts. Since then, Charles has never gotten around to stopping by even by himself. Mom came to visit a couple of times at their new apartment. She liked her daughter-in-law, sociable, friendly, energetic. Her son listens to her, and he's very much in favor of control. You can see that. That's what Mom told Charles. He even listened calmly, did not object. His wife really is a good influence. At the airport, looking for his flight on the electronic board, Charles stumbled, stepped on something hard, and almost twisted his foot. He cursed quietly, looked under his feet, and saw a child's wooden cube with letters on it, almost identical to the ones he had as a child. This one rolled farthest away. A thin, red-haired girl was collecting the other cubes in a box a little farther away. He hadn't thought of her in 1,000 years, but he recognized her immediately. Cindy, my goodness. She hadn't changed a bit. Still busy with her children's toys. Well, that's to be expected. She straightened up, looked around for someone Charles hadn't seen. He took advantage of it, jumped up quietly from behind, handed her the ill-fated cube from behind her shoulder, and suddenly in a stern inspector's voice, asked, "What is Cindy suddenly doing at the airport on a weekday?" Accompanying a daycare center on a tour of the uncles of the pilots and aunts of the flight attendants. Cindy shuddered slightly, barely noticeable, and turned around. Confusion and bewilderment flashed in her eyes for a few seconds, but was immediately replaced by a calm smile. Cindy rests sometimes. With a softly indifferent grin, she replied. She ignored the tactless prank. Charles wanted suddenly to continue the conversation and embarrass her after all. But Cindy saw who she was waiting for. A little girl with a mop of auburn curls and bright red sneakers was running toward her. Behind her came a panting, cheerful girl and a preschool boy. "Mom, it's okay. We're all cleaned up and everything is fine." The little girl reported to Cindy in a ringing voice. "Good for you, Foxy." Cindy laughed. "Take the cubes, put them in Mason's backpack, and don't look in anyone else's backpacks. I played customs with Mason. I found the little girl right away. She looked just like Cindy. Same thick hair, same clear skin with a few freckles. Only her eyes were not light brown, but blue, not almond-shaped, but almost round, big, and mischievous. You can already see that she will grow up to be very beautiful." Charles suddenly thought, "Thank you, Kathy, for putting this gang in order." She turned to her friend. "And I met an old acquaintance while I was waiting for you." And she gave Charles a polite nod. "We should go. Have a nice vacation or business trip." "And to you girls," Charles nodded. The friends separated the children, taking each of them by the hands, and went to the baggage claim line. Somewhere in the middle of the line for the Bali flight, an elderly woman with suitcases was waiting for them. I wonder if he was just choosing between Cyprus and Bali, but he chose Cyprus. It would have been funny if they had flown to the same resort town. But we didn't. And probably, with children choose other resorts, as John likes to say, will be their own children, you will understand. Where did you fly away, carefree, funky mood? Handed over the suitcase, sat at the bar with cognac and coffee. It seemed that at the opposite end of the hall still flashed this four, moms with children. Cindy the girl, about 5 years old. As far as he understood about children, they'd said goodbye just about 6 years ago. He could very well be her father. And his eyes. What's he getting so worked up about, though? There's no such thing as eyes. And if the child had been his, he would have been informed. Sister Clara, who never forgave him for dumping her girlfriend and won't even meet his wife or Cindy herself. But how does it usually go? Let's make up. Love, we're having a baby. Or her mom or his mom. At least as a warning that they might sue for child support. Nobody said a word. It doesn't work that way. So there's probably another option here. Cindy was looking for comfort after they broke up. And here was someone seriously comforting. That's fine. It's better to think that way. Anyway, she's not poor now. She's off to the seaside with the baby. When they met, she'd never been further than Bern. Charles had no intention of thinking about Cindy any further. He was trying to play a game. To guess which of the spicy girls in his line of sight was going where he was going. But the guessing game didn't distract him. There were no really interesting girls in sight, and he kept looking for a familiar silhouette. She had changed. No, she didn't look older. She was still just like a girl, a freshman. Light, graceful. There was a calm confidence about her, and something else elusive that made her stand out among the others. Yes, she'd always had good taste. But it was less and less frequent now, and that was unlikely to change. At least she should be able to enjoy her vacation. Molly called from Spain several times a day, counting nighttime, if she suddenly became sad at night, or on the contrary, wanted to immediately share her impressions. To have an affair in such an environment, when at any time can be a video call from his wife, only to fray his nerves. In Cyprus, Charles suddenly realized that he was really tired, and if he hung out not in a bar, not on the beach, then on a fishing trip. In the company of a quiet local uncle of age, John's father-in-law. Charles was even a little scared that he was enjoying this kind of vacation. Is he getting old or something? Somehow very early for this return to Bern, with fishing bikes for John. And normal life went on. For the next year, Molly drove him crazy with mood swings. They couldn't conceive. It got to the point where she decided to see a doctor. She hated going to the doctor. She made an exception for the dentist and presented it as a sacrifice for beauty. Going to the gynecologist was even harder for her. Charles waited doomedly for her to share the details, but breathed a sigh of relief. Molly had suddenly stopped sharing, whispering only to her mother. While she waited for the results of the tests, he did not forget to give her duty signs of attention and did not ask about anything, just to continue to leave him alone. But one day she came not like herself, fell back in the chair, and said with a tremor in her voice, "I have no chance." Here Charles rushed to comfort her, just as she had expected. He did feel a little sorry for her. She wasn't a bad girl. It wasn't fair that she was so unlucky. He said that doctors sometimes make mistakes, that they would still hope and try. You know, all the things you're supposed to do in cases like this. He himself was not depressed. He had no burning desire to have children. To be honest, he saw no tragedy in life without them. The only fat disadvantage he saw was that, Without children, Molly would have to take care of him and control him. After another year, Molly, having consulted with Mom and Dad, voiced Charles' decision. They would adopt a child, or rather adopt a child. She wanted a girl. Charles, accustomed to show firmness, but from fright remembered the past and answered categorically and adamantly no. Don't even try to approach me with that proposition again. You've grown up like a greenhouse flower. You don't know life, you have no idea what genes these rejects might have. I don't really believe in upbringing when there's been 7 generations of marginalized people. No matter what you do, the genes will show up. No, that's all. He was sure Molly wouldn't leave him because of that. She loves him too much. She'll whine from time to time. But he'd put up with that. He thought his marriage was pretty successful overall, better than most. Then, in the late fall, a vaguely familiar, melodic female voice called out to him at the mall. "Oh, Charles." He turned around. He remembered her not at once, but he remembered her. A perky girl with a rare name, Nancy, who had once wanted to wrestle him away from her friend Cindy. She'd really grown up. Pretty, boring, respectable, and by the looks of it, well-to-do. "Hello, Nancy. You look good." "Oh, come on. It's just a courtesy. I'm waiting for a friend. I've been through the galleries twice. If you're not in a hurry, let's have coffee." "Why not? Let's do it." We sat down in a cafe. He only took coffee. Nancy also took cognac. "I'm fine. I don't drive. I'm not good at it. There are people like that." "My husband drives me. It has its advantages. It's convenient, yes. You live in Bern?" "Yes. We moved here 5 years ago. Everything's fine. By the way, Cindy lives here, your ex-fiancée and my ex-girlfriend. I know that from my mom. I shouldn't have looked at you the other day. I just lost a good friend. But I'm okay with that. It's been a long time. Do you have a wife, children, or are you a love tramp, Casanova?" "I have a wife, no children. Not that I know of, anyway." "Well then, you don't know much," Nancy remarked without a trace of schadenfreude. "You really don't know, or just don't want to know." Charles had already guessed what she was going to tell him. "Our Cindy has a daughter with you. Lisa. She's already in school. You'd have to be such a principled girl like Cindy not to ask you for child support." "I don't think it's my child. My mother or sister would have told me." "Mother, I suppose. If someone had told her, Clara would know, but her friend asked her to keep quiet. When you and Cindy split up, she moved to Bern a couple months later, got a job at a private day care center. Some friend of her mother's, Aunt Evelyn, helped her. Then she married him." Imagine that. And my mom also has a friend at our women's health clinic. She told me that Cindy came to see them and that Cindy was pregnant. It's definitely your baby. When it comes to Cindy, you can be sure. So Cindy and Aunt Evelyn didn't say anything to anyone. It was just a quick getaway to Bern. Cindy left. She gave birth here, and she lives here. I don't know her address. I don't know her phone number, Daddy. Why are you telling me this now? I don't even know. Someone must have told you. You decide whether you need this information or not. Nancy laughed softly. Another 6 months passed. Spring came. Molly had lost weight from worry. Charles had always found thin people more attractive, but his wife didn't like thinness. She'd even forgotten his adamant statement about adoption. She kept asking, demanding, crying. But one day she met him from work, soft, calm, and thoughtful. After dinner, she made them both a cocktail, sank quietly into a chair and said, "You already have a child, so you don't want someone else's. You don't even ask where I went for 2 days. You're not interested. I went to your sister's. I've been wanting to meet her for a while, so I thought, why not now? They're both great sisters and nieces. I got it out of Clara that you had a kid. You know how hard it is to get rid of me, don't you? No, no, no. I'm not gonna fight. That was way before my time. On the contrary, I have something good to offer you. Don't laugh. I've given it a lot of thought, and it's a good thing. Why don't you meet my daughter? Why don't you come and visit us on the weekends? We'll give her gifts, support her financially, just be friends. We'll have a child in the house, and it won't be someone else's child. I know it's not uncommon for a girl to be friends with her stepmother. She's so pretty, your daughter. Clara showed me a picture of her, and very capable, as Clara says. She's a quick learner. Her mother will be very happy that they suddenly have support. Molly, I myself found out 6 months ago by accident that I had a daughter. You may not believe it, but it's true. If her mom needed my support, she wouldn't have kept me in the dark for so many years. She's a different kind of person, a little weird. Clara told me how you two broke up. Tried to be unemotional, smoothing over the facts, probably felt sorry for me. It's not for me to judge you. I had 2 abortions when I was young, and now I have no children. So as far as moralizing goes, that's not for me. If you're uncomfortable talking to your daughter's mom, I'll talk to her. Maybe it's better that way. I'll be honest, I'll explain everything. She'll understand. I'll be Lisa's aunt like Clara. Molly, I always thought you were a practical, reasonable woman, at least adequate. Why do you have such crazy ideas? Well, find yourself a hobby. Don't obsess about the kids. That's ridiculous. If you worked like me, you wouldn't have time to think about nonsense. Aunts, uncles, have you ever thought how stupid I'd feel in this situation? Like you think a lot about my feelings yourself. She wanted to say something else, it was obvious, but she kept quiet. Well, it was great that she had learned to stop, at least for a while. Cindy and Lisa were returning from a sports, ballroom dancing class, walking leisurely. Lisa was enthusiastically telling her news, demonstrating at the same time the new moves she had been working on today. It was very difficult for her to stop right after class. The instructor noted her flexibility and plasticity. The day is warm today. The sun is already warming them, not just shining on them. In the playground outside their house, away from 2 local grandmothers with strollers, a strange woman sat on a bench. When she saw that Cindy had spotted her, she stood up and walked toward them. A well-groomed brunette with a beautiful tired face, not a single wrinkle, but you could see that she was a grown woman, not a student, but definitely not one of the moms or other relatives of the children from her daycare center. Hello, are you Cindy and Lisa? Greetingly, but somewhat tensely, she asked. Yes, my name is Cindy. This is my daughter. Cindy replied in her tone, but a little wary. This didn't seem like an official visit. Cindy, do you have a moment to talk privately? Can we talk here? Lisa, take a little walk around the grounds. Please chat with our neighbors. I won't be long. Okay? The girl replied with a curious glance in the direction of the stranger. I'll be around if you need me. The brunette smiled, escorting her with an attentive look, and hurriedly introduced herself. My name is Molly. I'm the wife of Charles, Lisa's father. There was a careful silence between them for a moment. Cindy broke it gently first. All right, let's get acquainted. I won't even try to hide my bewilderment. Why do you need us? If we haven't threatened your family's budget so far, we won't. I realized that a long time ago. That's not why I came to see you. I wanted to ask you to let Lisa meet her father. Has Charles become so shy over the years that he needs an intermediary? Cindy laughed softly. If he suddenly wanted to communicate with his daughter, he would have come himself. all the more reason for you to mediate in such a matter. I can see he hasn't changed. He's as indifferent to the feelings of women as ever. I'm sorry, Molly. No offense. Just the facts. Cindy felt a strange sympathy for her new acquaintance. From Charles's wife, there was no hostility, no sense of superiority. She did not scrutinize Cindy, did not evaluate her, did not compare her with herself. She just looked at her expectantly and thoughtfully, choosing her words. Cindy, this is going to sound strange, but I would be glad to have my husband's daughter in our home. I have no children of my own, and he doesn't want an adopted one. She fell silent, giving herself pause again to choose her words. I think I understand. I don't need to explain further. Cindy stopped her. I'll tell you a platitude. Doctors sometimes make mistakes. I work in a kindergarten. I know many such stories. Every daycare center has a kid whose mom thought she was infertile. Hope for your chance. The attitude helps a lot. As for Lisa, I am getting married in a month, and for Lisa, my future husband is her daddy. She doesn't even question it. By the way, neither do I. Imagine if this were your child and your situation. What would you do? Yeah, I'm not coming back. Sorry for the stupid idea, the time wasted. I'd have a very different conversation with me if I were you. And I'm sure you'd understand, too. Cindy replied, Thank you. Molly nodded. She turned and walked toward the parking lot, waving to Lisa as she went. I felt sorry for myself at first, Cindy thought, looking after her. I've never been as lonely as she was, though. Sebastian won't arrive from his business trip until tomorrow. Lisa is already asleep, and she's not sleeping a wink. No, there's nothing to be afraid of course Charles won't come. He didn't like to complicate his life, and he was hardly in love. When they parted, Cindy was no longer lying to herself. She was in love with a man she should stay away from in the first place. How could I have been such a blind fool? She asked then, telling her mom. It wasn't even her mom. It was a question of space, but Mom was answering. If we were smart in love, humanity would have died out long ago. Convincingly she answered, So that doesn't speak to your personal stupidity. It's just the way things work. And I've had that happen to me. What do you think? See, I'm alive and enjoying life. I don't think I could ever really enjoy anything again. And it seemed to me the main thing is you don't force yourself. You don't have fun, not sincerely. You want to wear mourning for love, then wear it. It will end on its own, you'll see. Maybe psychologists would burn me at the stake, but that's what I think. Cindy believed Mom. Mom was not only her own psychologist, but she was also a psychologist to others. Cindy was sure that many of her clients had been coming to her for years, not so much for a closet makeover, but for a chat. They talk to their mom and see that their problems are not so terrible and insoluble. And then came a series of happy coincidences. Mom introduced Cindy to her wonderful friend No. No's older sister Camille was the head of a prestigious private daycare center in Bern and was visiting. And she lured Cindy to join her, even after she learned she was pregnant. Cindy had doubts at first about how she would be alone in Bern with a baby. Camille reassured her. Not alone. We're already family. Your mom and my brother are about to get married. I live alone in a big apartment as it happens. I can't stand being alone. I'd be glad to have your company if you don't like it, or if things don't work out. You can always go home. Cindy was a little shaky. She wasn't ready to leave her mom, her junior group, Jenna. She wondered how Camille would feel. Her mom gave her a shocked look. Don't think I'm kicking you out by deciding to start a new life, but I'd go if I were you. You should try it. It's not just that fate throws up such coincidences to make it easier for you to start over. That's how Cindy ended up in Bern. She lived, worked, raised Lisa, and a year ago, she met Sebastian in a supermarket, accidentally putting a chicken in his cart instead of her own. And it was the last chicken on sale. We laughed. Cindy was already married to Sebastian for 3 years when she found out she was expecting a baby. She went to the antenatal clinic to check in and bumped into Molly at the entrance. She had put on a lot of weight, but it suited her. "Oh, Cindy," she cheered. "Look, you were right. You must be a good witch." She pointed to her prominent belly, and Molly looked different, glowing with a contented calm. "I'm so glad you and Charles are doing well." Cindy said sincerely, "I'm fine, but I have no idea about Charles. We don't talk. I've only been with him for, 2 months since I met him. I tried like a stubborn jackass to get him to adopt a girl from the orphanage. He even stopped calling me by my first name, just Hen. They say I'm obsessed with the desire to have a child. I'm limited, and I really already had something like insanity. I'm used to getting what I want. Of course, it was hard on me. Charles had a young girl. I didn't feel anything special when I found out, but I felt sorry for the girl. I met her and drew a verbal portrait of our mutual Charles out of female solidarity. By the way, we are still friends with her. And Charles she left not immediately, of course, but the main thing herself. I gave up. I decided to get away. I went on vacation alone so I wouldn't have to see his perpetually disgruntled face. And there I had a resort romance, and I suddenly saw thanks to him, and my husband does not love me at all, and I do not love him anymore. I was wrong about him. I'm weird. Why should I be surprised? So I came home and got a divorce. He even quit his job out of fear, as if my father would hurt him. He never would. My dad's the wrong man, and my resort fling turned out to be a serious love affair. Who knew? And now I'm about to be a mom. I'm pretty sure I know the real reasons why Charles and I didn't have kids. He didn't love me, not at all. And it worked for some reason, like contraception. Everyone laughs at me, even my mom. One old doctor said, "Yeah, she's seen cases like this before. I'm not the first, and she believes me. If it feels right, it's right. Bring your baby to our daycare later." Cindy smiled. "I was just going to say, I'll bring my baby to your daycare center." Molly laughed. "I'm having a son. You don't have to wait so long. Come visit us with your husband." And they exchanged phone numbers. Cindy went home happy. She remembered Molly sometimes, and it was a sad memory. It was nice to know that another person's life had changed for the better. It seems like they're definitely going to be family friends. If that's how I feel, that's how it is.